Okay, so we're starting off with the F tier, which is by far the absolute worst Pokemon in the game, at least competitively. When I say a Pokemon's an F tier, I pretty much mean you could use this thing technically, but it would be basically impossible to have it actually be anywhere close to good. These are Pokemon that, like, if you wanted to build a team around them, you would have an extremely difficult time getting any wins. Starting off the F tier is Dugtrio. Dugtrio is just one of the worst Pokemon ever made. It doesn't have very good move pool, but it really struggles because its stats are just abysmal. Like, it has a good speed stat, but everything else is so bad. Like, Dugtrio is one of the only Pokemon in the game who can get O-code by priority attacks, even if they're not super effective. It's really bad. Next up, we have Electrode. Electrode kind of has Dugtrio syndrome. Actually, a lot of these Pokemon have the syndrome where their stats are just really bad, and like no matter what else about a Pokemon, unless it's just some crazy attribute like Smeargle learning every move in the game, a Pokemon with bad stats is just really going to struggle to contribute. So Electrode not only has bad stats, it also has a pretty limited move pool. The only thing you can kind of do with Electrode is set up like Reflect and Light Screen, but there's so many better Pokemon for that yeah, I can't justify putting it any higher than F. Sunflora's next. I like Sunflora as a Pokemon. I'll always like it ever since it was crucial in my Emerald Kaizo runs, but it's not very good competitively. It's really slow, like shockingly slow, and yeah, though it has good ability Chlorophyll, and I'm pretty sure it definitely has solar power as well, it just doesn't have enough going for it that you can justify using it. There's basically a better Pokemon that does all of what Sunflora does for all of its niches, and so yeah, it's really not that good. Again, mostly held back by its pretty terrible stats. Ursaring. So I like Ursaring. I think Ursaluna is going to be a great Pokemon when it comes to the game. Right now, though, I can't really say anything good about Ursaring. It's maybe, you know, you could maybe argue for E tier. Like, it has like guts. Its stats aren't that bad. It is really slow. The reason Ursaring is down here is because it's not good. And even if it were good, well, it's not. If you wanted to use Ursaring, you could do something like Guts, Flame Orb, maybe Tricker and Facade Sweeper, but there's so many better Pokemon to fill that role that, yeah, I can't really justify putting it any higher. I love Delibird. It's not very good. I'm looking forward to when Iron Bundle becomes legal, because that's actually like the good version of Delibird, but Delibird's just not very good. It was actually used a little bit in 2010. There was one player who used it a fair bit. It has Fake Out, which is good. It has Icy Wind, and that's just about it. Its stats are really some of the worst in the game. I'm putting Houndoom in the F tier as well. I feel bad putting it this low because it's definitely better than some of the Pokemon here, but it's so frail. It's not fast enough and it's not strong enough to really contribute anything. If it still had solar power like its Mega Form, I could justify putting it in E, but without solar power, it just doesn't really do anything. Dark and Fire are pretty good types actually, and it's obviously a good defensive type because well, referencing Incineroar, but Houndoom is so much worse. It's really just a stats issue with this thing. Cacturne. I wish Cacturne was better because I like its abilities. Sandville making it immune to sandstorm damage and giving it evasion, and Water Absorb obviously making it immune to water type attacks is really cool. Again, the stats are so bad. At least they gave Cacturne Spiky Shield. It's not enough to like even come close to bumping it up to the D tier or the E tier, but it's better than nothing, I guess. It's just, it really sucks. Altaria. So Altaria might belong in the E tier. This one, I'm gonna say this one of all the Pokemon in this tier that I'm gonna put in this tier, Altaria's number 1 or number 2 that could be moved up. It just struggles to do anything. Here's the good thing about Altaria. It gets Cotton Guard, really good move, boost your defense by 3 stages. Pretty sure it still gets Roost as well. I'm like 70% sure that it still gets Roost. And it has the ability Cloud9, which is a really good ability. So it has some things going for it, which is why I feel like maybe F tier is too low. But at the same time, its stats are just so bad. I'm gonna sound like a broken record. I promise when we get into the later tiers, I won't talk about stats. But for the F tier, the stats are really important for making a Pokemon work. And Altaria's stats are just not. They're not as bad as a lot of Pokemon in the F tier, but they're not good enough that it can like really contribute to a battle. If you bring a Pokemon to a battle and you're going to bring it like as one of your 4 Pokemon, you want it to be doing something, and Altaria just doesn't do anything aside from like turning off the weather, which like even Golduck is better. You know what I mean? Tropius. So Tropius is actually one of my least favorite Pokemon ever because this might be a little anecdote. I hate Tropius because back in the day, I was really interested in the ability Harvest. This is pre-2012, like 2012 before the World Championships. And I found Executor. And Executor gets Harvest, and I love it. And it's a really cool ability. And Harvest Executor with the Citrus Berry carried me to the 2nd place at the World Championships in 2012. Now, following this, and even prior to this, I was interested in Harvest as an ability because I thought it was so strong. So I tried a bunch to make Tropius work, and it is just so horrible. Like, however bad you think Tropius is, I promise you it's worse. I think I'm like the most qualified Tropius hater of all time, and I love bananas. Like, I like grass types, I like bananas, I like Harvest, and it's just such a disappointment. Like, this thing needs like 150 more stats, and that's like to even be in like the D tier. You know what I mean? So yeah, I'm really upset with Tropius and the fact that it's not better. Love Disc. This thing feels like just a gimmick. Like it's just here as almost like a joke. It's like some sick joke that Game Freak made up, as in like, hey, you want to see a Pokemon that's like not really a Pokemon? That's Love Disc. Look at this thing's stats, and then if you want to argue with me, like, yeah, just look at the stats first and then think about it a little bit, because this thing has no stats and it's got no move pool either. It has nothing. Like there's better water types in every category, and it has not even a good ability. It's literally just here to farm heart scales. That's it. Cricketune. I forgot this thing's name for a second. No use case for Cricketune. Bug is the worst type in the game. It's Bug with no secondary type, with not good coverage moves, not good supporting moves, and not a good ability. It's really bad. Rotom Fan maybe should be higher. It definitely has better stats than everything else in here, but like I'm putting it in F tier, not so much for the same reason as everything else. I'm putting it in F tier because like you should never be using Rotom Fan, honestly. Like if you want to use an electric flying type, you should be using Kilowattrel. Like there's no use case for Rotom Fan here at all, ever. I think it's just not good enough. I'm putting a Llama in F tier as well. It's better than Love Disc, but like it doesn't have any way to do damage. And basically I initially had it when I was making this like kind of list prior to just know where I was going to put things. I was thinking that a Llama should go in the E tier because it's bulky. Like it has a decent stats. It's like it's actually really bulky, but it doesn't have any offense, but at least it's got the bulk. But the problem is that they removed Scald, and basically the only thing, and I suspect, I didn't check this, but I'm pretty sure that they removed Toxic as well. And that was kind of the only thing that a Llama could do. I mean, it's way better in singles where like it can use Wish and Regenerator to heal up its teammates, but in competitive Pokemon, it's just not doing anything. Oricorio. So Oricorio, this is all of them, by the way. It has a really neat ability called Dancer. Dancer is really cool. I kind of have lambasted a lot of the Pokemon in the F tier here because they don't have anything unique about them, and that's not the case for Oricorio. Oricorio has the Dancer ability, which basically says when any Pokemon on the field uses a move, like a dancing move, which is stuff like Quiver Dance, Teeter Dance, Dragon Dance, etc., Revelation Dance, which is a signature move, Dancer will cause the Oricorio to activate it as well. So like, for example, let's say we lived in a world where Quiver Dance was the most popular move. Maybe you could justify using Oricorio because it would get the boost when your opponent used Quiver Dance or when you used Quiver Dance. We don't live in that world though, and although the Dancer ability is really, really cool, and if we're on a Pokemon with better stats, it would be legit. Like the Dancer's a great ability. I'm not saying anything bad about that. Oricorio's stats are so horrible that like it's just really hard to use. I think I'm like maybe being a little too harsh on Oricorio. I think it might be an E tier Pokemon, having thought about it a little more. But I think I put it in the F tier because it makes me mad, because it has so much potential, and the like Pokemon is just so bad that yeah, you really can't justify it being any higher. Vespiquen. It has so many weaknesses. It's 4 times weak to rock, weak to fire, electric, flying, ice, probably some other stuff too, to be honest. Like it's really bad. It's like really, really, really bad. And it doesn't do anything. Like it's got defensive stats on a horrible defensive typing, and it doesn't have any offensive pressure, and it doesn't do anything. It's really bad. I don't know what the real name of this thing is called. It has Stakeout, Yungoos, Zangoose. What's the big form called? Anyway, this weird rabbit is pretty bad. It doesn't have stats. It has a cool ability, but the ability's not, the ability Stakeout basically punishes opponents for switching out and will do double damage to them if like the target switched in this turn. Cool ability, but the problem is that it's on a Pokemon that doesn't pressure the opponent to switch. So yeah, it doesn't get a lot of use out of it. It's pretty bad. What is this name? Yungoos? Gumshoes. Okay, Spidops. So Spidops, no stats. It gets a cool protecting move. It's like Spiky Shield, but it does something else, like lowers the defense or something of the target. You really like it doesn't do anything. It sits there and does nothing. Like it's really bad. In single battles it's probably better, but in doubles it's pretty bad. And last but not least, Wugtrio. So Wugtrio, it's not really Wugtrio's fault that it's so bad. It's tied to having the same base stat total as Dugtrio, and as we already talked about, Dugtrio's base stat total is abysmal. This thing is really funny because it has Final Gambit, which is a move that does damage the higher, like depending on how much HP you have, and I believe it has 10 base HP. It might be 30, but I'm pretty sure it's 10 base HP, which is very low, very, very low. So yeah, that's the end of the F tier. Let's talk about the E tier. I just want to take a second and ask you to subscribe. For Scarlet and Violet, I have quadrupled the amount of videos that I'm putting out, so subscribing now is like the best bang for your buck. I'm really trying to be the first competitive Pokemon channel to reach 1 million subscribers, and I kind of need your help to do it. Regardless, I really appreciate you watching, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. Okay, next up, we're into the E tier, and basically the way that I would think about these Pokemon is that they're bad. They're really bad, but they're slightly better than the F tier Pokemon. Like they have some use. It might not be very broadly applicable, but they can do something at least. Starting off, we have Persian. So Persian's bad. Alolan Persian is good. I like Alolan Persian a lot. Base formy Persian, not so good. It's basically only up here because it has access to stab, technician, fake out, which is something. Like, fake out is really valuable. Attack, especially right now where it's being kind of undervalued because the users aren't as good as they've been in the past. But yeah, other than that, it's not really that good, but hey, it's better than F tier at least. Cloyster is up next. So Cloyster, if you're a singles player, you're probably mauling right now, but the truth is that in competitive Pokemon, Cloyster's not very good. Its main role is like as a Shell Smash user with like Rock Blast and Icicle Spear, but it's so specially frail. There's a number of good spread moves right now that can deal with it, like Expanding Force, for example. It needs to run White Herb, which is like kind of easy in competitive Pokemon to cancel out, so it can easily like lose its boost. And even once it sets up, it's not always like strong enough to be KOing everything. Basically, really frail setup Pokemon are not as good in competitive Pokemon in general because unless they can target both Pokemon down at the same time, like since they can only take out one Pokemon at a time, you have to invest a turn to set up, and then you can only take out one Pokemon at a time. So if you're really frail, you might just end up trading one for one, which then still puts you down. I hope that makes some sense. That was more than I intended to say, but yeah, hopefully it makes sense. Fortress has a problem where, oh, singles players are so mad right now. They're so, oh my god, they're gonna be so mad. Oh my god. Okay, I'm sorry. What can I say to make this better? I don't know. I can't think of anything. Anyway, let's talk about Fortress. Basically, the problem is that it's way too passive. It just kind of sits in the field and doesn't really do anything. And when a Pokemon like can't really exert any offensive pressure, it's very easy to ignore and kind of turn the battle into like a pseudo 1 versus 2. And it's like a bulky Pokemon, but it's not very specially bulky, which is a liability, and it has a 4x weakness. But it has better stats than anything in the F tier, or most of the things in the F tier, and yeah, like it can probably do something. I just don't know what it is, so it's an E. Donphan, I think another good singles Pokemon. Average Tusks Donphan. It doesn't have very good stats. It's not a horrible Pokemon. There are way better ground types. It gets Ice Shard. I mean, it's not really strong enough to use Ice Shard very well, but it gets it. It's not awful. Like, it could be worse, but it could be a lot better too. It's not very good. Swalot, I think actually has good coverage moves. Like, it gets Flamethrower and Giga Drain and Sludge Bomb. It's not very strong, but it's like not that weak, and it's like decently bulky. It's not good, but I don't know. Like, if your favorite Pokemon is Swalot, you could definitely like have it do something at some point. Maybe not every point, but some point for sure. I'm putting Naked Rotom in here. Naked Rotom's kind of hard to rank, but I like basically Naked Rotom has different stats than the Appliance form of Rotoms, in that the stats are a lot worse. It's slightly faster, but way less bulky, which is a big deal. But Electric Ghost typing isn't horrible. Like, there are times where like being immune to Fake Out and normal type moves, especially normal type moves right now, because like Extreme Speed with Terra Normal is kind of a thing. So like you can have like Terra, or just like, you know, Will-O-Wisp and be immune to Terra Normal Extreme Speed, and yeah, like it's not a great Pokemon, but it's honestly not bad. Like, it could maybe even be in D tier. Of everything so far, it's definitely the best. It might even be the best in the whole tier. Sawsbuck, it's like a chlorophyll user. Maybe you could do something with like Terra Blast because it's normal type as well. It's not horrible. It gets Serene Grace, but it also doesn't really have any moves to take advantage of Serene Grace, so that's kind of a waste because Serene Grace is kind of a broken ability. Then again, I'm like kind of glad this thing doesn't get Rock Slide, so that's fine. Pyroar. There was a period, there was like 1 week in 2014 where Pyroar was good, and other than that, it's been pretty bad. It's not good. It's fast though, and it's relatively strong, but it's very frail and it's not quite strong enough to justify using, but you could use it. Like, it's not awful. Go-Goat. I thought this thing was grass normal. I even said this in at least one video that it was grass normal type. That's wrong. It's pure grass. It has a cool ability, but it's kind of hard to set up. Yeah, it's not great. It's not good, but it feels better than F tier, so I put it here. This is more of a feeling thing. Toxapex. Oh, the singles players are so mad. I'm probably gonna get like death threats over this. Toxapex has the same problem as Fortress. It sits there, it doesn't do anything, and it's not exerting any pressure. Not a good Pokemon. Komala. This is kind of hard to rank because its ability is like really weird. Comatose basically keeps it in a state where it's permanently asleep and it can attack while it's asleep. So it's immune to status effects, which is like status conditions, sorry. Which is not a bad ability, but its stats kind of suck. Like, it's not very strong at all. Yeah, so I don't like it very much. I'm putting both Lycanrocs here. They're different Pokemon, like they have different stats, but like basically you should almost, I can't think of any reason to be using the Lycanroc forms other than Midday. Midday is actually like legitimately good, but these two, like, they're just worse than Midday, so they're not awful Pokemon. Pure Rock type isn't good, but I put them in E tier because like you'd pretty much always be wanting to, like, you'd almost always prefer Midday form, and these are just kind of like, they're just worse. Like, they're just not worth using. most of the time, but they're not horrible. Like, you could use them, but they're not good either. Crabominable I put in here because it's a really difficult Pokemon to use because its defensive typing kind of sucks. Ice and Fighting isn't good. And it's really slow, which means you can pretty much exclusively only use it on Trick Room teams. But it hits really hard, and it has a good signature attack, Ice Hammer. So, like, if you got this thing in position, it can... There have been times where I've lost to Crabominable teams. It might even be D tier in all honesty, but it's just so difficult to use. Like, when you do use it and use it well, it can absolutely win games. And so for that reason, it should maybe be higher. But the conditions you have to set up to get it there are pretty numerous. Flapple. I almost feel like Flapple should be lower, but it's definitely like... Okay, a lot of Pokemon, like, that we've talked about so far, kind of just struggle to do anything. That's not really Flapple's problem, but Flapple doesn't have speed and it doesn't have bulk. It does have the ability Hustle, which raises its damage output at the cost of its accuracy. I would never use this Pokemon without Dynamax. Dynamax, you could at least, like, justify using it a little bit. It's not very good defensively. It has a ton of weaknesses, including a 4x weakness to Ice. Its ability Hustle's fine, like, to let it actually do something, but it's just really, really not good. But it has some offensive presence, so I'm putting it in D tier or E tier instead of F tier. I don't like Squawk ability at all, but it has kind of a couple things it can do. It has Intimidate and Parting Shot, so although it doesn't really have the bulk to use it, it can still, like, be somewhat valuable. And I think this is actually a more viable set for it. It gets Guts, and it's a normal type, and it learns Facade, which means that you can run, like, Guts, Normal, Facade, Terra Normal, and probably KO a bunch of Pokemon. So for that reason, I'm keeping it out of F tier and putting it in E instead. Last but not least is Bombardier. So I wanted to put this thing in F tier, but it just isn't fair. It's not that bad. Like, its stats aren't that bad, but they're not that good either. It's got good typing. Like, I like Dark Flying. It's like kind of a nice hybrid between defense and offense, and its ability is cool. Like, it gives it stab on rock type attacks, which is, like, not bad at all, but it's like, it's just not good. Like, its stats don't do anything well enough for me to justify putting it any higher, but I really couldn't feel... I wanted to put it lower because it makes me mad, but I really couldn't justify it. Anyway, that's the end of the E tier. Let's talk about the D tier next. Okay, now we're into the D tier, and normally you might think, oh, the D tier is, like, pretty bad, but here, basically what I mean when I say a Pokemon is D tier is that, like, C and D tier are kind of this divide between, like, good, like, or, like, they're okay, right? The Pokemon in the C and the D tier are okay, is what I would say. And the D tier are Pokemon that are okay, but, like, leaning towards bad. And the C tier, as a spoiler, what's gonna come next could be anything. The C tier are Pokemon that are, like, okay but leaning towards good. So let's kick things off with Wigglytuff. Wigglytuff has actually won a regional before. It's a regional champion Pokemon. That's because it has access to the ability Competitive, which is an ability that says any Wigglytuff stats are lowered, it gets +2 special attack. And it has a really good move pool and is surprisingly bulky. Now, we're not in a format where Intimidate is very common. In fact, it's one of the least common Intimidate has ever been. And so without Competitive, Wigglytuff just, like, struggles a lot to get any damage done, but it's not a bad Pokemon. Like, it does have really wide coverage, but, you know, it actually could be okay right now. Like, basically, like, Dragons are pretty popular, Dark types are pretty popular. It's not a good Pokemon, but yeah, like I said, it's okay, and it has some stuff going for it, but it is really weak until it gets its boost, so that's its main weakness. Also, it's slow and pretty physically frail. Other than that, it's a great Pokemon, kind of. Venomoth. So Venomoth is cool. It has Tinted Lens, which is a powerful ability at, especially for bug type Pokemon, that powers up not very effective moves. Now, it's not great. It has kind of two things it can do. It can do a Quiver Dance set to set up and then use Bug Buzz and make it hard to switch into, or it can do Sleep Powder stuff. The problem is that Venomoth stats aren't that good, but both Quiver Dance and Sleep Powder are powerful moves, so it's not awful. It's not good. It's just Venomoth. Muck. So Muck, I like it more than Swalot because it's, like, a bit bulkier, I would say. I think, like, I like Alolan Muck a lot. Alolan Muck is a good Pokemon. It mostly struggles because Poison just isn't a very good type. Like, defensively it's fine, but offensively it doesn't have that many good fire or physical coverage moves apart from some fire ones. It's not horrible, but it's not in a great place right now. Like, Garchomp is pretty popular, and it's not strong enough that, like, even with the, like, I think it gets Fire and Ice Punch, but the thing is that it's not powerful enough to actually be doing enough damage with these moves, and it's not bulky enough to really be, like, super tanking like the moves that it would take otherwise. So it's, like, okay, but it's certainly not good. Flareon. So Flareon got a bit of a, like, it has a new set that it can run. Basically, Flareon is kind of like Crabominable in that it can be a Trick Room sweeper with but with this set, rather than going for immediate power, Flareon gets access to Flare Blitz, which is powerful, but it also gets the ability Guts. So you can do, like, Guts, Toxic Orb, Flareon, and do, like, Terra Normal Facade with Flare Blitz. It's not terrible, but it's not good. Like, it really requires Trick Room to be up to be good, and that's really limited, and you would really prefer other Pokemon a lot of the time. But It has something that it can do, so I'm putting it in D tier. Ampharos has pretty decent stats, but it's very slow and its move pool is really limited. So although it's decently bulky, it's just not really good enough like on its own to really be any higher, but it has decent stats, so I'm putting it in D tier. Espeon actually has pretty good stats, like it's relatively fast and strong, but its move pool really suffers like many evolutions. Move pool just isn't great. Yeah, like that's like a main drawback of it. Like Psychic just isn't that good of a type. I talked about this in my ranking every type video. Psychic is just not that good a type anymore. It gets some supporting moves it can do, but yeah, it doesn't really do enough on its own to justify putting it any higher. And it's like, yes, it's fast and it's like relatively strong, but it doesn't have the moves to take advantage of this like offensive stats, and it's pretty frail. Blissey is just worse Chansey in competitive Pokemon, so I'm putting it in D tier. It doesn't do anything on its own, and if you're gonna build a strategy around like basically making an unkillable Chansey slash Blissey, you would normally just do it with Chansey because it's better. So yeah, Blissey goes in the D tier, but it has some things it can do. Gardevoir, maybe I think Gardevoir should be in the C tier. We're gonna put Gardevoir in the C tier and come back to that. Gardevoir should be in the C tier. We'll just talk about it now, actually. Fairy Psychic offensive is not amazing, but it's not horrible. Fairy offensively, especially as a special attacker, is pretty decent. And as a Choice Scarf user, it can outspeed and KO Garchomp and Hydreigon and Murkrow. I'm pretty sure, so that's actually pretty valuable, so I'm putting it in C. Masquerain has Intimidate, which is good. It gets Tailwind, which is good, but it's so frail, and it's got the same defensive typing as Vespiquen, which we already talked about is like really bad. So like it has some stuff going for it, but it's pretty bad. Camerupt, it's like really slow. It has not good defensive typing, and it's like not frail, but given how many weaknesses to common types that it has, mainly just water and ground, actually. Are those only weaknesses? Yeah, I guess they might be. But basically being weak to water and ground is like kind of a liability right now. And so Camerupt's like not strong enough to work as like a Trick Room sweeper. It's not fast enough to work outside of Trick Room, and it's not bulky enough given its weaknesses to do that much. So yeah, I'm putting it in D tier. Grumpig, like, it's not that it's bad. It gets Thick Fat, which is a good ability. It can set Trick Room, but it's not very strong. And the truth of the matter is, if you want, like, there's so many bulky Psychic type Pokemon. Like, there's literally so many of them that, like, Grumpig doesn't do anything to stand out at the moment. So I can't really justify putting it any higher, but it's not, if your favorite Pokemon is Grumpig, like, you could use it. I think it has a good shiny as well, as I recall. So Viper, I guess this is where I'm putting poison types. Like, it's fine. It gets Glare. It gets Sucker Punch. I think it gets Earthquake. I know it gets Flamethrower. Like, it has decent coverage moves, but like its stats just suck. Like, it's not fast, it's not strong enough, and it's not bulky enough. So I won a regional with Mega Banette, so I always liked Banette a bit, but its base form is just not super good. It has a decent attack stat, and Ghost is a good offensive type, but there's so many dark types right now that, like, if it had Prankster, you could maybe justify using it because you would get like Prankster Will-O-Wisp and stuff like that, Prankster Disable, but without Prankster, it just doesn't have enough going for it. Whiscash should probably have been in the E tier, but I guess I'm putting it in the D tier. It's bad. Like, you would rather use honestly pretty much anything else, but it has okay stats and like gets like water and ground is like a pretty good typing, so I'm putting it in D, but it's not good. Glalie is another one that you could have put in E tier, but Ice isn't a solid enough offensive type, and it's not fast. It's not fast. Yeah, it's got like okay, it's base 80 across the board, right? So it's not horrible in terms of stats. It's not good, but it's not awful. It doesn't have any coverage moves. It probably makes okay use of terrestrialization, but yeah, it's not great. Like, of the D tier Pokemon, I think Whiscash and Glalie should maybe have been lower. Luxray. So Luxray feels like a fair Pokemon to put in the D tier. It has some things like going for it, like it gets Intimidate, which is a good ability. It has a good typing. Pure Electric is good. Decent moves like Wild Charge, Ice Fang, Fire Fang. Like, they're not great, but they're not bad. Like, they're usable, right? Like, Ice Fang on an electric type is like decent, especially given that it actually has a very good attack stat, as I recall. It struggles because it's like, it's not frail, but it's not that bulky, and it's also like really not that fast. I think it's like base 90. It might even be base 75, somewhere around there. And so because it's not fast enough, it like basically like it's not strong enough to work as a Trick Room sweeper, but it's not fast enough to work like outside of Trick Room. It just kind of gets stuck in the middle. Not a horrible Pokemon by any means, but not that good either. Floatzel, you know, Floatzel you could maybe justify putting higher because it's a Swift Swim Pokemon that can work in the rain. I actually just today caught a shiny Weasel. That's not a joke. I don't normally encounter shiny Pokemon, but I was EV training and I ran into a shiny Weasel. So maybe that's why I'm inclined to put Floatzel higher. It has like some stuff going for it. It's a fast Soak user. Soak is a really cool move, but it just got nerfed in a pretty big way because it doesn't work on Pokemon that have terrestrialized. And like, if your opponent knows it's coming and they just want to protect their crucial Pokemon, they can just terrestrialize and then it doesn't work. But it gets Wave Crash in the rain as a physical attacker. It's probably not horrible. Like, this one maybe could have been in the C tier. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if at some point during the generation we see like a rain team with maybe Choice Banded Floatzel and it actually does big damage, but Until then, yeah, I'm putting it in D. Skuntank is cool. It has good typing. Like Psychic or Poison and Dark is actually really good typing. It's immune to Psychic and it only is weak to ground. But Skuntank doesn't really have the stats. Like it's like a mixed attacker. It gets Flamethrower. Its abilities are okay. Like I guess, what is it? Aftermath is fine, but doesn't feel like it comes up that often because I think it's only a contact move that activates it. Sucker Punch on a Dark type is good, but like it just doesn't do enough. Like its stats aren't horrible, but like it doesn't do enough on its own. So yeah. Honchkrow. I was gonna say you should just use Murkrow, but Honchkrow fills a different role. Like it's a pretty strong offensive dark and flying type Pokemon. I remember using this back in like Gen 4, Gen 5 with like Life Orb. It gets Sucker Punch, it gets Tailwind, it gets Brave Bird. Like it has some stuff that it can do, but it's really frail and it's not very fast. So it's like kind of at the mercy of setting up Tailwind. So on a frail Pokemon, that's like not great. Frostlass, you know, maybe Frostlass should have been a C tier. It has some stuff it can do. It's really frail. It kind of needs the Focus Sash item, but to its credit, it gets Icy Wind, Shadow Ball, Will-O-Wisp, and Frost Breath. So Frost Breath is really interesting because on Pokemon like Paldean, Tauros, Aqua, or like Blaze Breed, they have Anger Point, which, you know, raises their attack stat to +6 if they get critical hit. And, you know, Frostlass has this move, Frost Breath, which always crits. So it's like always kind of been used on Tauros, right? Even before Paldean Tauros was a thing, like you would use Tauros plus Frostlass. So it's not awful, like, but it's really difficult to use and it feels pretty gimmicky to me. Basculin has adaptability, which is a very powerful ability, especially on like a Terra Water Pokemon. So I bet it could do some big damage on the rain. 90% sure it gets Swift Swim as well, but it's really frail. It's another Pokemon that like as Terra, Normal, Choice Band, Extreme Speed Pokemon pick up, like Pokemon that are really frail just have to watch out. So yeah, Electros I like a lot. This is one of my, I wouldn't say it's one of my favorite Pokemon, but I like it. It has good coverage moves. It's got a great ability typing combination where it has no weaknesses. Most of the time you see Electros, it's going to be kind of like a bulky Assault Vest special attacker where like it takes advantage of having no weaknesses and maxing out its bulk to just like kind of be a good like Pokemon that sits in the field and outputs damage. But it's really slow and again, it's not strong enough to work on a Trick Room team. So I can't put it any higher than this, but it's not a bad Pokemon by any means. Creogonal is kind of like Frostlass in that it's a fast and frail ice type Pokemon. Creogonal's weird because it has like a super high special defense stat. So it can like, and a really low physical defense stat. So it can kind of like be bulky in the right circumstances. Fast Icy Wind Pokemon are good. We're going to see that a lot when Iron Bundle becomes legal. But it's so frail, especially on the physical side, and almost all priority moves are physical. So it just is really risky to use, but it's not terrible. Okay, Braviary. Braviary was actually really good in Sword and Shield, but it was largely because of Dynamax, and because it was like Intimidate was popular, it had Defiance, and lowering stat moves were popular because of Dynamax. It's fallen off pretty hard in Scarlet and Violet. Without Dynamax, it's a really frail Pokemon, and it can't boost its speed outside of Tailwind, whereas in the past it had Max Airstream. Defiant also is not as good anymore because there's less Intimidate and there's no max moves to lower your stats. So yeah, although it was pretty good in Sword and Shield, it's definitely fallen off pretty hard. So next up we have Hawlucha. Hawlucha is another Pokemon that was better in Dynamax because it was able to double its bulk. It has the Unburden ability, which allows it to double its speed stat if its Helldimer is consumed. This is most often seen with Weakness Policy or a Seed. Like, there's probably a set you could run where you have like Sylveon Hawlucha and you side Quick Attack, activate the Weakness Policy, get +2 speed, +2 attack basically, and try and sweep. But I just don't think it's that strong. It's really inconsistent. It's gimmicky. Like, it's not that good. It's really frail and it's not strong enough to really justify putting it any higher. So yeah, Dedenne maybe should have been an E tier, but there's like funny recycle strategies you can do with Cheek Pouch and eating a berry. Like Electric Fairy, if it was on a good Pokemon, would be really good typing. Nuzzle's good support. It's not good. It's actually pretty bad. Maybe it should have been an E tier. Bruxish. I hate Bruxish because it's so ugly and it feels like a real waste. But it has a really good ability called Dazzling. This is the same ability, though a different name, as Sarina and Farigiraf. Dazzling is a really good ability. We've talked about how important Priority is. Having a Pokemon whose ability protects your whole team from it is really good. It's not like the worst Pokemon ever made. I considered bringing it to Worlds in 2017, but it was very bad, so I didn't. But yeah, like the ability is good. It's actually like surprisingly not that weak. So you could probably do something with it. It's just not very good. Greedent. I'm putting Greedent this high because it's a bulky Belly Drum user, and with Flamigo's Co-Star, like you actually have the ability to do something. And Greedent's like really bulky. Like I said, Belly Drum. There's some other sets it can do as well. It can be like a setup sweeper. Like I think it definitely gets Swords Dance. I'm pretty sure it gets Curse as well. Yeah, like it's not the strongest Pokemon ever made, but at the same time, it like has some stuff that it can do. So I'm putting it in D. Copperage is cool. It'd be cool if they gave it like a move that set up its signature, like Iron Spike or Steel Spike, whatever it was called, from its Gigantamax move. That would be cool, but they didn't do that. So yeah, no dice there. It's like a decent Pokemon. It's got good stats, but it kind of has the same problem that a number of Pokemon have, in that it pretty much requires Trick Room to work because it's just so vulnerable because it's so slow otherwise, and it's not quite strong enough to like if you're gonna run if you're gonna run a team that sits up Trick Room, you want Pokemon that are either stronger in Trick Room or better outside of Trick Room, and Copperajah is neither. Like, it's not good enough outside of Trick Room, but it's also not so strong in Trick Room that you can justify using it. So yeah, I'm putting it in D tier. Sandaconda, forgot its name for a second there. So Sandaconda, I like Sandaconda. I've always liked Sandaconda. I like GMAX Sandaconda, though I never got a chance to really like use it to its full potential. The thing is that like setting up Sandstream is good, but there are better Sandstorm users, you know what I mean? And on that note, actually, where's Hippowdon? I don't think I have Hippowdon in D, but it should be in D. Hippowdon, like both these guys, you should be using Tyranitar. Sandaconda is like in some ways better because I think its like stats are better than Hippowdon, though Hippowdon is bulkier, but like Sandaconda I think has more offensive potential. But also on the downside, like Sandaconda's Sand Spit ability only activates when it takes damage, so it could like you can't switch it in and immediately get the benefits. They're not bad Pokemon by any means, but they like just they're too defensive. They don't do enough, and their abilities aren't so good. Like maybe if there was no Tyranitar, you could justify using one of these two, but like with Tyranitar, you should just be using Tyranitar. Its stats are so much better. Pincurchin, I like Pincurchin a lot. If it still got Rising Voltage, I would put it way higher, but without Rising Voltage, it is the only electric terrain setter in the game, which is valuable, but there's not really that much that takes advantage of electric terrain, and Pincurchin's not good enough on its own to justify it being any higher, so I have to put it in D, but I do like this Pokemon. Poltegeist, this Pokemon's cool. Like, this is another Pokemon that we saw some use in Dynamax formats, because you could do weak armor weakness policy and then side beat up or side activate the policy and go for like Dynamax or, you know, expanding force. But kind of like we talked about with Cloyster, it's so frail and it can only target one Pokemon at a time that like even if you do this whole strategy, like yeah, you'll have a really strong offensive Pokemon, but the cost will be that it will die immediately and you had to set it up, and you're probably only trading one for one a lot of the time. So it's gimmicky, it's inconsistent, its signature move sucks, and that's all I have to say. Oinkologne probably should have been lower, but it has okay stats and an okay move pool. It's not good, but yeah, it's fine. I don't know. It's actually pretty bad, but it could be, it's usable, so I'm putting it in D. Clodsire. So I'm putting Clodsire in D, but so I've been saying that this Pokemon is pretty bad for a long time, but, big but, Clodsire actually can be used as a check to Dondozo because it's physically bulky, like, you know, step 1, and it gets the Unaware ability, step 2, to make it Unaware allows it to ignore Dondozo's attack boost, and number 3, it also gets the attack Haze. So you can also run Water Absorb Haze as well. That also works. So Water Absorber Unaware with a physically bulky Clodsire allows you to check Dondozo. Now the issue is that if they don't have Dondozo, like Clodsire doesn't really do anything a lot of fights, but it like I don't know, like it's at least something, right? Like it's better than I might have put it in E tier otherwise, but thanks to like the fact that it actually checks Dondozo, I'm putting it in D. So if you love Clodsire, you could use it on a team conceivably. Stantler's in D. I always tell people that I like Stantler because it's the only skill swap Intimidate user, which allows you to do stuff like, okay, so what you could do is like King Gambit Stantler, protect Trick Room, and then skill swap Intimidate to your opponent, and which then activates King Gambit's Defiant. It's gimmicky. Stantler stats are pretty bad. I'm putting it in D, but that's the reason it's not lower. I'm curious if Weird Ear will be good. Probably not. Leafeon. I love Leafeon. This is one of my, like, this was the first Pokemon I used as a rank 1 challenge, which had a big impact on my channel. I like it a lot. I initially had it higher, but the thing is that like without Dynamax, it loses a lot of like the power that it had in Generation 8. And Sun isn't that good. I thought Sun was going to be a lot better, but it's not that good. And there's other Chlorophyll users you'd rather use, so I'm putting Leafeon in D. Spiritomb. I like Spiritomb. I think it's good. It doesn't have no weaknesses. That's old. That's boomer brain talking. It's only weak to Fairy, and it actually gets Trick Room and Will-O-Wisp and Stab Snarl. So it actually ends up being like a pretty decent supportive Pokemon, and it's like pretty bulky. So it's not a great Pokemon. I think like against an opponent who knows what's coming, like you're probably not going to catch, like it's probably like less effective. But if you can catch an opponent off guard and hit like a key Pokemon with Will-O-Wisp or set up a Trick Room at a weird time, I think it could actually be pretty good. So yeah, I like Spiritomb. I could even put it in C tier if I wanted. Hypno, I don't have that much to say about Hypno other than like what I said about Grumpig, which is like it's another bulky psychic type Pokemon whose main thing that it can do is set Trick Room. Hypno's, I guess, niche is that it has both Inner Focus and Insomnia, which are useful to block Intimidate and sleeping moves like Spore respectively. But it's not like there's better bulky psychic types like Bronzong and Oranguru, to name a few. I'm putting Sudowoodo in F. I forgot to do this earlier. It's really bad. It has no stats. It's so slow. It's so frail. It's not strong enough. It goes in the F tier. Zoroark in D tier. Its ability is actually really cool because it causes like a lot of mental strain on your opponent. Like they have no way of knowing. Like even if you don't bring Zoroark to the battle, which you probably shouldn't because it's not very good, they still have to cover for it, and it can lead to them making like aggressive misplays, like close combating a ghost type, for example, because they think you've disguised Zoroark as it. The problem is that Zoroark stats are just barely too low to be like really that helpful. It has a signature attack I think it's a signature attack, Night Daze, which is cool. But beyond that, like, I don't know, like it just doesn't do enough damage and it's really frail. So it's kind of a liability. And if they guess correctly that you brought it, it's pretty bad. Let's talk about Swift Swimmers. Beartic. So Beartic's a cool Swift Swim Pokemon. Ice. It benefits from Terastallization, has decent stats. It's pretty worthless outside of the rain. And so far we've seen some rain teams like have some success and they have better rain like Swift Swimmers than Beartic is the truth, especially because a lot of water types learn ice type attacks. So I can't really justify putting Beartic any higher, but it's not a bad Pokemon. Lumineon. Okay, Lumineon's here for two reasons. The first is it gets Tailwind, and the second is it gets Storm Drain, and that means that it can be used in theory to check Dondozo. I forget if it gets Haze. I don't think so. It probably should. I don't know. If it gets Haze, it's even better as Dondozo check. But yeah, like Tailwind is valuable, Storm Drain is valuable. Its offenses suck. They're so bad. I was trying to see like how much Ice Beam would do to Garchomp, and it does like nothing. Like, I don't even think it kills Garchomp. It's like really, really, really weak. So yeah, its offenses suck. And it's mostly just here because yeah, Storm Drain is pretty good. Heracross, it's the same issue as a lot of other Pokemon in that it's like too slow to be used outside of Trick Room, too fast to be used in Trick Room, and it doesn't do enough damage, and it has a bad typing, but it has decent move pool. Not really. It's fine. Like, I like it as a design. I don't like it competitively. Avalog, super physically bulky, but not so specially bulky with bad defensive typing. Could definitely see an Avalog team doing well with like Iron Defense, Body Press stuff. Maybe a good like defensive Terra type to turn off some of Ice's weaknesses like water, but you really want to make sure that it's used to, like, it's really good against physical based teams, not so good against special based teams. So it's too inconsistent to put any higher, but it's not terrible. I wanted to put Revavroom higher, but like I haven't seen anybody do anything good with it yet, so I have to put it in D tier. It has potential, but its move pool just sucks. It gets like no coverage moves, and it doesn't get that many good supporting moves either. So I'm gonna put it in D tier, but maybe it could be better. Like, it is 4 times weak to ground, but other than that, it does have a pretty decent defensive typing. So it just needs something to do other than just like sit there, you know? Spin Out is a cool attack. Poison Jab and Gunk Shot are cool attacks, but it's not that good beyond that. Lurantis I initially had higher, but I'm gonna put Lurantis in D tier because they nerfed it. I think they took away Superpower from it, if I'm not much mistaken, and that was the main reason to use it. So you can still do Leaf Storm shenanigans with it, but without Superpower, it's frail. Like, it's basically a Pokemon that, like, if your opponent doesn't know what's coming, it can get like set up and then it can win, but it's like super slow, kind of doesn't require Trick Room, but is really vulnerable without it. And without Superpower, it's just like, that was the main draw on using it, is boosting your attack and defense at the same time. So without that, it's like, no thank you. And then lastly, we have Veluza. So Veluza's signature attack Fillet Away is cool, but it's not great. It basically cuts your HP in half. I thought it was a quarter, but it's half. And boosts your speed, attack, and special attack by 2 stages. But Veluza's so frail that, like, if you get hit with a spread move, like, you're kind of just done for a lot of the time. And yeah, it's like, I don't know, it's like not fast enough to outspeed things in Tailwind even at +2. So like, it just ends up being pretty vulnerable a lot of the time. Yeah, so I can't justify putting it any higher. But yeah, that's pretty much the whole D tier. Now we're gonna get into the C tier, which is where things get more interesting. Like, this is where we started to get into like some of the Pokemon that are actually like pretty decent to like fully decent. Okay, now we're into the C tier, and this is kind of the divide, in my mind at least, between like the Pokemon that are not so good and the Pokemon that are starting to get good. So pretty much everything that I put in the C tier I think has potential. Like, I think it could be used on a serious team and not like explicitly hold it back, but it's not like necessarily going to be contributing the most to any given battle, but they can still be good, especially in specific use cases. So starting out with Raichu, this is one of my favorite Pokemon. I won Worlds with it, so it'll always hold a special place in my heart. Raichu's really good, in that it's a fast and disruptive support Pokemon. The problem is that as a support Pokemon, it's pretty frail, and so even though Fast Fake Out and Nuzzle is really valuable, especially in a format where Prankster Tailwind is so common, it can be really easy to just kind of get caught off guard. Yeah, it's not like a bad Pokemon by any means, but it might go down before contributing as much as it needs to really feel like it's super important in any given battle. Raichu really shines when electric type attacks are common, like things like Thunderbolt or Thunder Wave, Discharge, etc., Volt Switch, because of its ability Lightning Rod. And right now, like, electric types really aren't that common, like, especially compared to how common they've been in the past. Like, there's not that many good electric type Pokemon right now, so Raichu, by virtue of there being less electric types moves that are common, is also a little bit worse. Next up, we have Golduck. This is like an interesting Pokemon. It's mostly used as a swift swim sweeper, excuse me. The main problem with Golduck is that it needs to rely on Hydro Pump because every water type lost Scald, rest in peace, in order to get like a strong special water type attack, and so it makes it a little bit inconsistent as a swift swim sweeper. But if it hits Hydro Pump, it does extraordinarily good damage. If you did like Terra Water, Life Orb, Hydro Pump in the rain, it's going to be doing big damage. Also gets Ice Beam, Encore, Calm Mind, Terra Blast, of course, Icy Wind. So pretty good, like pretty decent supporting move pool. It does kind of need rain to function, and it is inconsistent because of Hydro Pump, but other than that, it's pretty good. Vaporeon. You could actually even justify putting Vaporeon even higher. The reason Vaporeon is good right now is because it's an excellent answer to Dondozo. There's a couple Pokemon that kind of serve as like one mon answers to Dondozo, and with the ability Water Absorb and the attack Haze, and the fact that it's just naturally very bulky, Vaporeon is like a super good answer to Dondozo, excuse me. Yeah, so that's the main reason it's this high. It also is like a Pokemon who, if it still had Scald, I would definitely put it in the B tier, like, because it would contribute a lot to battles outside of just Haze. But even with Icy Wind, Helping Hand, Haze, and I don't know, like Muddy Water, I think is probably the best fourth move. It should actually be contributing a lot. So yeah, so I think Vaporeon's actually pretty nice. Chansey, if there was a question mark tier, I'd put Chansey in the question mark tier. Since generation 7, maybe even generation 6, there have been some players who build teams specifically around Chansey. They normally use like Carbank or Shuckle to use Guard Split to make Chansey super tanky, and then basically try to outlast the opponent with like Toxic or Seismic Toss on the Chansey. It's gimmicky, but it's strong. Like if your team is weak to it, like you'll just lose. They pretty much always win, or they don't always win on timer, like, but yeah, like basically like the games normally will go to timer or pretty close to it. So yeah, it's like not an easy strategy to play. It's not very fun to play or to play against, but it is like a legitimate strategy. So I'm putting Chansey in C tier because like it's hard to win a tournament with it, but it could definitely win games. This team doesn't exist just yet in Scarlet and Violet, but I'm sure it will at some point. Like it always pops up at some point. So yeah, like Chansey is something you need to be aware of. Ditto, this would also maybe go in the question mark tier. Like it was kind of funny because you could use it to copy like Dondozo, I guess, but then you would like only have 5 PP on every move. Like basically Ditto's the stronger the Pokemon in the format are, the better Ditto is, and right now the power level is overall pretty low, but it's still like a decent Pokemon. Like I'm sure like a Choice Scarf set has its merits. Like yeah, like it could definitely do something, I'm sure. Jolteon I wanted to put higher, but like initially when I first made this tier list a while ago, I put it higher at first, but I'm putting it lower now because it's just not that strong. And I don't think that it gets Weather Ball anymore. Maybe it gets Weather Ball. I was running Calc with it at some point. It's a lot weaker than I was hoping. So with Dynamax, Jolteon was actually pretty good and hit hard, but without it, it's just too frail and not powerful enough to really justify using. Jumpluff is actually a good support Pokemon. Fast Sleep Powder and Tailwind is very scary. It gets Pollen Puff, it gets Rage Powder. Great supporting moveset. I'm not putting it higher because Sleep Powder is inherently inconsistent. Because it's inaccurate, and then also even if you hit it, like the sleep turns are volatile, so I can't put it any higher. But Jumpluff is legitimately a pretty good support Pokemon, so I'm putting it in C. Umbreon, listen, Umbreon almost won the World Championships in 2019. It was good in 2022. It's another Pokemon that like kind of shines when we're using really powerful like legendary Pokemon. It's not bad now, but like teams are kind of inherently prepared for foul play just because Murkrow's everywhere, and so yeah, Umbreon's main form of damage output is foul play. Yawn is a little bit worse now because Dynamax is gone, and Dynamax really heavily punished you for switching out if you were Dynamax, so Yawn was great as a tool against Dynamax Pokemon. It's not bad by any means, I'm sure. I'm sure it will be good when the Paradox Pokemon are legal because it can run like Sun Boost and Moonlight. But for now, I'm putting it in the C tier. Slaking. So Slaking is bad, obviously, but because of Doodle now giving you the opportunity to overwrite of your partner's ability, I'm putting it higher than it would be otherwise, but it's a little gimmicky, it's a little inconsistent, and the fact of the matter is that there's a lot of abilities that Prankster Graph-II can't really copy because they're either blocked by Dark typing or they're blocked because they're incopyable, like Good as Gold or Disguise. And of course, you can't copy Murkrow or Hydreigon or King Gambit or a lot of other Pokemon. So even with Slaking and Graph-II, like you have to run Graph-II, which like isn't that good of a Pokemon in general, and then also like you could just end up getting stopped by your opponent. So yeah, so I'm not putting it any higher, but it like could definitely do well on a team. Medicham, Mega Medicham actually hit hard. Regular Medicham is a bit weaker, but Fake Out with huge power is pretty good. If it were like a little bit stronger, like in its base form without the Mega, I would definitely put it higher, but in base form, it's still not so bad. Zangoose isn't a great Pokemon, but it does have, I believe, Guts, unless I'm much mistaken. Guts, normal type Facade, with like decent enough stats to pull it off. So I'm putting it in C tier, but it would be kind of hard to make it work. Drifblim is another Tailwind user that gets Unburden. The main problem with Drifblim is that there's not a great Pokemon to activate Unburden right now. You're kind of stuck with like, I don't know, Indeedee Female to activate Psychic Seed. Like you don't really want to use Pincurchin for Electric. I don't even think there is a Misty Terrain user. And then Grassy, you obviously need Arboliva, which is a little like hard to set up and requires you to get hit first. So Drifblim does get Will-O-Wisp and Strength Sap and Tailwind, so it's not a bad Pokemon by any means, but it doesn't have there's nothing enabling it right now. Like if Tapu Lele were in the format, then it would be super good, but it doesn't have anything like to really activate it right now, so I'm putting it in C. Lucario is honestly, so you can use it with Beat Up Justified, but it's not that strong. You could use it as like a Choice Band Extreme Speed user, but it's kind of frail. or you can use it as like a choice scarf, inner focus, final gambit Pokemon, which is actually pretty legitimate. It's not great. There are better users of this, like Annihilate, but it's not bad either. So I'm putting it in C. Glaceon. So when I first made this list, I put Glaceon in E or F, but that's not fair. It belongs in C, like especially with the buff to hail, turning it into snow. Glaceon's actually like a legitimate Pokemon right now. Snow Cloak is a really good ability, and Snow making it physically bulkier is really, really valuable because it's already pretty specially bulky. And it gets Blizzard, which obviously is a really strong attack. The main issue is you have to run it with a Boma Snow if you want to get the benefits of Snow, which like stacks a lot of weaknesses. But when it's like going, if you have like Choice Specs Blizzard, it's really hard to switch into. And with like the natural special bulk and the physical bulk from Snow, excuse me, yeah, like I think it could actually be pretty decent. Mismagius. I was gonna put this in D tier, but it's not a bad Pokemon. Like it has Nasty Plot, it has, I believe, Icy Wind, unless I'm much mistaken. This is kind of like Delibird syndrome, where we're gonna be seeing a lot of this Pokemon adjacent when Paradox Pokemon are allowed. But for now, it's not a bad Pokemon. It has like Thunderbolts, might get Focus Blast, but it's kind of bad. Can use Terastallization pretty okay. Like pretty good speed stat, pretty good special attack stat. Ghost is a hard type to switch into. Not great. It gets Trick Room, but not awful, so I'm putting it in C. Rotom Fridge form. So I like Rotom Fridge, but it's the worst of the Rotoms other than Fan and Naked, I think. It's a little too inconsistent to get it to work properly, but with the Snow buff, it's definitely better than it's been in the past. I think in the past, without the Snow buff, I'd put it in D, but I think it's a C tier Pokemon. I think it could probably be good in the right context and the right team. We'll just have to see if anybody can figure what team that is out. Crocodile. I really went back and forth on if Crocodile should be in the C tier or the B tier. I'm putting it in the C tier, but I do believe in this Pokemon. It's got good stats, good abilities, good typing, good move pool. It just like doesn't feel like it's super set up for success right now. Meowscarada is kind of a big deal right now. Like Meowscarada is on a lot of teams, and yeah, having a Pokemon that ignores Intimidate and critical hits for like Grass Stab is pretty scary. So that was in the end the deal breaker. But I do think Crocodile could be good. So I'm putting it. I'm still calling that out here. Toxicroak. Rain isn't that good right now. It's gonna be Toxicroak is normally good as like a fake out user with like dry skin, but it's pretty frail. Yeah, there's a lot of ghost types running around right now as well, and fighting poison just doesn't feel like that good coverage at the moment. So I'm putting Toxicroak in C, but it's not a bad Pokemon by any means. It can definitely like do some stuff. I don't think it gets close combat. If it did, it would be better. But yeah, like with like even with like Drain Punch and Poison Jab and Fake Out, it's like I feel like on the right team it could be good, but it's not a very wide Pokemon. Like it kind of needs a bunch of specific circumstances to do well. Haxorus. So there's a lot of dragons that are good right now. Haxorus is not one of them, but it's still a strong dragon. It has a stupidly high attack stat. It's a bit slower than you'd want it to be, and it's a bit frailer than you'd want it to be as well. But like if you have Choice Band Haxorus, you can do damage. If you have Life Orb like First Impression Haxorus, you can do damage. So it's not a bad Pokemon, but it's a little bit inconsistent, I think, and you're normally better off with a better dragon. Vivillon. Okay, Vivillon. This is a tinted lens. No, go here. This is a tinted lens sleep powder user. Sleep powder, rage powder, kind of what we said about Venomoth and Jumpluff, but it's better than Venomoth for sure. And it's a bit better in general because with Compound Eyes, Vivillon is actually a really accurate sleep powder user. It's mostly held back by its kind of like mediocre stats, but Compound Eyes Sleep Powder is really scary because it eliminates a lot of the variance with Sleep Powder. I think, if I'm remembering correctly, it gives it 30% extra accuracy, or maybe it's only 10%, but regardless, it makes it hit a lot more often. And so, yeah, it's a good support Pokemon. Amoonguss is pretty popular right now. We'll talk about Amoonguss in a bit, but like there's some counterplay to Sleep Powder support stuff because Amoonguss is popular, but even still, like it's still a good Pokemon. Dragargle, Dragon and Poison is interesting because normally like dragons lose to fairy types, and Dragargle is a, you know, dragon type that with poison built in, so it beats fairy types. It's really slow. It's got a good ability and adaptability, but it's really naturally pretty slow, so it kind of has to be used on Trick Room. It does get Haze, so it can be used like kind of to counter Dindozo, I guess, though it's like still weak to Order Up, so it can't be used that well. It has some stuff going for it. It has pretty decent stats apart from its speed stats, so I'm putting it in C tier basically. Florges. So Florges, I was looking at Florges at one point. It's really hard to make it work. It's really similar to Sylveon, except it doesn't have the spread damage from Hyper Voice like it has Dazzling Gleam, which is a lot weaker. It's not a bad Pokemon by any means, like, but you most of the time are better off using Sylveon, is kind of how I feel, because you get a lot more from Sylveon compared to Florges, but there's probably a use for Florges. I just don't know what it is. Clotzer. I wish that every season I'm like, this time it's going to be good, but it's never good enough. Clotzer is a really cool ability called Mega Launcher, which makes its pulse move stronger, including Heal Pulse. Like Heal Pulse heals 75% from Clotzer if Clotzer uses it, which is, I just think is cool. It's not that good, but it is cool. It has good move coverage because it basically has Stab on Dark Pulse and Aura Sphere, both of which are pulse moves. Plus Water Pulse is stronger. But it's slow and it's not quite strong enough to like be used in Trick Room and it's too slow to be used outside of Trick Room, and it's not quite bulky enough. So it leaves a lot to be desired, but it's a cool Pokemon with like some potential that's unique. So I'm putting it in C tier. Klefki. So Klefki is really good as a Pokemon. I like it. I brought it to a regional before. I think I've actually brought Klefki to at least 2 regionals, if not 3. It's really good because it is Prankster and it's good at setting up like Reflect and Light Screen. That being said, like the thing about Klefki is a lot of the time, if you want a fairy type that's going to have Prankster and set up screens, you're probably going to want Grimmsnarl because it's got a better defensive typing in my opinion. And yeah, like it's just, and it has an actual offensive stat, so it can actually do damage. So Klefki is not bad, but like the role that it fills is kind of so eclipsed by Grimmsnarl that it's kind of hard to justify putting it any higher. Okay, Noivern. So Noivern actually, wait, where'd it go? Noivern actually has something it can do this time, like this format compared to other dragons. So number 1, it's really fast. It's faster than most, if not all, other dragons, which is great. Number 2, I guess Tailwind, which is a great supporting move. We love that. It's awesome. Number 3, Noivern gets Boom Burst. So what you can do is do Stab or Terra Normal, Life Orb, or Choice Specs, or Normal Gem, Boom Burst, and actually put on a ton of pressure, especially against an unprepared opponent. So something like Noivern Goldengo, where you can just like Tailwind and like then go for Terra Normal Boom Burst with Make It Rain. Sounds really scary. Now it's not broken by any means. Like, you know, it's still like it's a powerful attack, but it's not like the most powerful attack ever created. So I'm not putting it higher, but you could definitely use Noivern in this format. Goodra. Kind of the opposite, well, not the opposite, but a very different vibe of dragon than Noivern. Goodra's a very tanky dragon. It has really good move coverage. It gets like pretty much a move of every single type, but its stats kind of make it feel a little awkward at times. Like it's really specially bulky, especially with an Assault Vest. But it doesn't do as much damage as you'd like, and it also is a bit slower than you'd like, so it can kind of get like, it kind of just like feels vulnerable a lot of the time, where like you're trading damage, but you're trading damage slower, so you're like you end up on the losing end. A good Pokemon, but not a great Pokemon, I would say. Like, definitely tough to use. Passimian should maybe be in the D tier. I'm gonna put Passimian in the D tier. I think I shouldn't have had an NC. It's like, it was better when Dynamax was around and Intimidate was everywhere, but without that, it's kind of just like a below average fighting type. Yeah, it's not that good. Palossand. So Palossand's a bit gimmicky. Its ability Water Compaction gives it a +2 defense boost every time it's hit with a water move, which is really cool. And you compare it with Weakness Policy, and it makes good use of Terastallization because Terra Dark is pretty good. So you can do like Weakness Policy, boost your defense, like boost your offenses with like, you know, with everything. It's really cool. The problem is, here's the problem. Let me tell you. The problem with Palossand is that a lot of the counterplay that exists to other stuff in the format, like Dondozo, mostly Dondozo, is also very good against setup Pokemon in general, like Palossand. So, you know, maybe somebody has unaware Skeledirge because they want to beat Dondozo. Well, that also happens to beat your Palossand. Or maybe they have Haze on a random Pokemon. Well, that also beats your Palossand. So I like Palossand, but it's even in a format where like we don't have these specific anti-stat boosting mons and moves around, it's kind of hard to use. So like I can't really justify putting it any higher, but it is a cool Pokemon. Budsdale. Definitely one of the better C tier Pokemon. Has good stats, has a couple good abilities with own tempo and stamina. It's a Trick Room sweeper that actually can work as a Trick Room sweeper, but it's not very good outside of Trick Room. I've played against a couple Mudsdale. I've played against an Assault Vest one. I've played against a Choice Band one. It's a good Pokemon, but I just feel like it's really vulnerable outside of Trick Room, and it can be hard to make full use of it in Trick Room. So I'm not putting it any higher, but it's not a bad Pokemon by any means. Barraskewda. So I tried Choice Band Terra Water Barraskewda at my real life Pokemon gym event. I was amazed. This thing was doing like 90% to Rotom Wash, which is a lot of damage. And in Swift Swim, you can even get around like Prankster Murkrow setting up Tailwind. So yeah, it's so frail. You want to talk about Pokemon that struggle with priority attacks? This thing, it gets like, if this thing takes an attack, it doesn't matter what the attack is, it's gone. Like, it does not survive. But it does so much damage that, like, I don't know. I feel like I wanted to put it in at least C tier, because if you like lead badly against like Pelipper, Barraskewda, you're losing a Pokemon for sure, no doubt. Toxtricity. So I don't like a lot of things about Toxtricity, but it does have the Punk Rock ability, which powers up sound moves, and it gets Boom Burst, which you know is a sound move that is really strong, like we talked about, and it can use Terra Normal. So like Terra Normal, Choice Specs, Punk Rock, Toxtricity does stupid amounts of damage with Boom Burst, and since it has so much offensive potential, I'm putting it this high. But it definitely like is really frail and is stupidly slow and like has a lot of weaknesses, but Boom Burst is strong. Phalanx. So Phalanx is cool. It gets Defiant, which makes it hard to lower its stats. It gets No Retreat, which is a really great setup move. Makes pretty good use of Terastallization with Terra Steel. Same issue as Palossand. Like, it's a stat boosting Pokemon in a meta that is like very built to counter stat boosting Pokemon. So yeah, can't really put it any higher. Colossal. So even though this is also a stat boosting Pokemon, my issue with Colossal is actually not the fact that everything else I've said, that is also an issue, but we don't even get to that point because like So of course I love Colossal. The first thing I did was test it out. It's so weak. Like at +2, it was doing as much damage as I thought +1 would do. I've been like very spoiled by Gmax Focalith, but without it in its base form, it's unbelievably weak. Heat Wave does no damage, Rock Slide does no damage, Terra Ground Earthquake does no damage, nothing does any damage. Like +2 Rock Slide was not killing like Murkrow. I don't know if you even know if that's true, but that's what it felt like. It felt super weak. So yeah, I'm not putting Colossal any higher because it does no damage, and everything we said about stat boosting Pokemon is still true. Indeedee male. It's like, now that Indeedee female also learns Trick Room, there's not really a reason to use Indeedee male. I don't think Indeedee female should learn Trick Room, but I'm not the one who gets to make the call on that. So yeah, basically Indeedee male, it's like the offensive version of an Indeedee female, but I don't think it's that good comparatively. Especially, it doesn't even get Expanding Force anymore. Yeah, just, it's like, listen, it's still like got Fake Out, it's got Trick Room, it's got Psychic Terrain. It has some stuff going for it, so that's why it's in C tier in the first place. But yeah, like it's too frail. And it's like, you should just use Indeedee female most of the time. Frostmoth. I like Frostmoth. Good use. Like, listen, this thing is the worst typing in the game, the single worst in my opinion. So like being able to change its typing is really good. Quiver Dance is a great attack. Ice Skills is a phenomenal ability. Ice is a good offensive type. I feel like this thing should be good, but no one's supported that yet. Like no one's really shown it off yet. So I'm putting it in C tier, but I really believe in this thing. I think this could end up being a B tier Pokemon. Appleton, super tanky, good move in, what is it, Apple Acid? Yeah, like good ability and thick fat, great use of terrestrialization, bulky leech seed user. It's a little bit slower than I think a lot of players are like interested in playing, but I think it's super strong. I think it could be really good. Good typing, like I already mentioned, like leech seed is so strong on it. Recover, yeah, like I like this thing a lot. I think it could be good, but it's like, it kind of causes the game to take forever, so I understand why people aren't using it. Hatterini. So I went back and forth on if Hatterini should be C or B tier, but like without Expanding Force, it's just so much less threatening. Like this is an offensive Trick Room setter, which is like valuable. You want that sometimes, but it's not quite offensive enough to really feel like it's making enough of an impact a lot of the time, if you know what I mean. So yeah, like maybe it should be higher. I don't know. I just feel like it's like good, but like a little underwhelming. So I'm putting it in C tier. Stonejourner. Love this thing. Brought it to an official tournament. Power Spot is cool. It's a really cool ability that powers up its partners. Basically gives them a life orb, and it gets Wide Guard as well. So basically Power Spot and Wide Guard are the two things that made me put it in C tier over it being lower. Wide Guard's in a really good spot right now. Spectacle Dango is big, Earthquake Garchomp is big. There's just a lot of spread damage right now. Expanding Force, Heat Wave from Armarouge, Earthquake from Dondozo, Icy Wind from Tatsugiri. And being able to block it all with Wide Guard is really valuable, and the ability is also really cool, so I'm putting it in C tier. Ice Cube maybe should be in D tier. I just haven't tested it enough to really know. Ice Face is cool. It's a really cool ability. It gets Belly Drum, which is cool. It's a little exploitable because it's like against special attackers, it's just way worse. Like if this worked like kind of like Disguise does, it would be way better, but Ice Face will only break and change its stats when it gets hit with a physical type attack. So the opponent, if they're smart, can kind of play around that. And it's mostly used as a belly drum sweeper, and kind of like we've said, everything that boosted stats is kind of in a rough spot right now, courtesy of Dondozo. So yeah, sorry about that. I initially put Dunsparce in B tier, but it's really fair to put it in C tier. Like no one's been able to make it work yet, so I think I should probably put it in C tier. Hyper Drill is a great move that attacks through Protect. Somebody told me it just broke Protect, then somebody else told me it didn't, so I'm not even sure how it works in truth. It also gets Tailwind, which is a very valuable speed control option, but the truth of the matter is that it's a little bit too slow to set up Tailwind like preactively. And so you basically, like, if you set up Tailwind before anything else moves, then you get the full benefit for like one more turn, whereas if you set it up after, you only get to make use of it for 3 turns rather than like 3.5, if that makes sense. So it's not the best Tailwind user. It's not a bad Pokemon by any means, but like I would have to see somebody actually do something good with it beyond like the stored power gimmicky set with Rattle to really believe in it anymore. Low Kicks. I think Low Kicks is cool. It's not a bad Pokemon. It has Tinted Lens and First Impression and Sucker Punch. Like it's got basically like, it's pretty decent at doing damage, but the problem is it struggles to stay alive because its bulk isn't very good and its defensive typing isn't very good. So, well, its defensive typing isn't horrible. I shouldn't say it's not very good, but it's not great. And I just feel like it's not really one-shotting anything. It can like 2-shot some stuff with some help, but like that's not always enough. So I'm putting it in C tier. Rabsca. I wanted to put Rabsca higher. I really believe in this Pokemon, but kind of like Dunsparce, like no one's really shown off making it work yet. It's a bulky Trick Room setter, but what separates it from the other bulky Trick Room setters is its access to the move Revival Blessing, which is very valuable. I totally think this thing could be good, but like no one's really shown any promise with it yet, so I'm putting it in C. Houndstone. Brevard? Houndstone. Sand Rush user's cool. Last Respects is not very good. Play Rough, Will-O-Wisp. Will-O-Wisp is good. It's like a fast Pokemon that can be used on sand teams. I think it's okay. Like Play Rough, like is good into dark types like Hydreigon and Murkrow, and it's also good into dragon types like Garchomp. It's just kind of hard to make work, but I think it could be okay. I believe in it, but it's not great. Like it's not like a Pokemon you're super thrilled. Like if you got a random VGC team and you got at a Houndstone, you wouldn't be like, yes, you know. Orthworm. Okay, let's talk about Orthworm. I wanted to put this higher, but I don't think I can justify it. It's a little bit too exploitable, but Shed Tail plus Earth Eater is really good. Iron Defense Body Press is good. Helping Hand is good. It's a cool Pokemon. I like it a lot, but it's kind of tricky to use and it can't come to every matchup, but Shed Tail is really good. So I'm putting it in C. Let's go Villain. At some point in the future, this will be a good Pokemon for sure. Maybe. I think so. The main issue with Scovillain is that the only way to get Sun Up via an ability is with Torkoal right now, and Torkoal just isn't doing very well. And like Torkoal Scovillain is like not a very good lead because you have Torkoal sitting there, and unlike Lilligant, who can use like After You and Sleep Powder, Scovillain can't. But having a fire type chlorophyll user is like massive. And when we get like Groudon or Koraidon, who we know we're getting at least, like I think Scovillain will be super strong. Cloth. Cool ability, pretty bad stats. It's fine. Like you could get a win with it, but you'd be struggling to win a tournament with it. I think it's not great. Like, but the ability is cool, and being able to boost your stats via your ability is really nice. So I'm putting it in C. Graphite is a little bit too gimmicky for my taste, in all honesty. Like, oh, this one here. It's a little too gimmicky for my taste, but like having Parting Shot, Encore, Super Fang, and Doodle as prankster attacks. Well, not the Super Fang is prankster, but you get what I'm saying. Like, it should be good. It should be usable on the right team. It's not very flexible. It's not very splashable, but we already talked about it with Slaking. Like if Regigigas was in the game, that's another use case for it. So yeah, like it's an interesting Pokemon, and I'm curious to see more of it. So I'm putting it in the C tier. Mawastiff. This thing has a lot of stuff going for it, so I'm kind of surprised that no one is using it at the moment. Yeah, good ability, couple good abilities actually. Pretty like decent move pool. Gets Play Rough, gets Jaw Lock, gets a couple other good moves as well. I'm surprised no one's using this thing. I think it should actually be good, but its speed is a little lower than you'd like, and I don't think it gets Sucker Punch, so it doesn't have the benefit of a lot of middle speed dark types, so maybe that's why. But yeah, I'm curious to see if anybody finds a way to use this thing. I think it has potential. And last but not least, in the C tier, we have Brambleghast. It's cool. It has some stuff going for it. It has Shadow Sneak. It has pretty good attack stat, but its stats on the whole are a little bit mediocre. And you kind of are forced to pair it with a Tailwind Pokemon. Yeah, not just like its ability Wind Rider is actually pretty good, but like its stats are just pretty mediocre. And there's so many dark types right now that like it just doesn't feel great to use a lot of the time. So I'm putting it in C tier, but I do think it has potential. Anyway, that's pretty much everything for the C tier. The B tier is where things really start to get good. Okay, so we're into the B tier, and this is what I would say is where we started to get into the good Pokemon. The Pokemon in the B tier are not overwhelming, but they are pretty much all meeting one of two criteria. They're either good in a general case, or they're especially good, but only in a really specific case. Kicking off the B tier, we have Slowbro. I like Slowbro a lot. It's a good bulky Trick Room setter that, because of its water typing, actually matches up really well against Dondozo teams, contrary to some of the earlier bulky psychic types that we had. It gets Body Press, which is useful, can make use of its good physical defense stat. It gets Slack Off, it gets Regenerate. It has a lot of things that it can do. Losing Scald obviously hurts it, but it's still a good Pokemon, and I think it deserves its place in B tier. Gengar is really interesting. Gengar is another Pokemon that actually is used pretty often to counter Dondozo because it outspeeds Dondozo even at +2 speed, and it gets access to the move Haze. So you can have Gengar on your team and use it like with Icy Wind or Will-O-Wisp or Taunt, Sludge Bomb, Shadow Ball, and normally Haze. And basically what it allows you to do is bring it in against Dondozo in the back, or bring Gengar on the back, and then if they bring Dondozo, you can just bring it out at some point and use one survive one hit with Focus Sash, and then use Haze to get rid of the boost, and then you're in a big advantage. And it's still useful outside of hazing because of Icy Wind and Will-O-Wisp and Sludge Bomb and stuff like that. So it's actually pretty good. Tauros, both forms. So Tauros Blaze Breed and Tauros Aqua Breed. I kind of don't know where to rank these two, in all honesty. I'm putting them in B because I think it's safe, but they might be even higher. So when the format first started, nobody used Tauros. Nobody used any form of Tauros. And I'm putting I don't know where I put the regular form, but it's in C tier. I don't remember where I put it. But the fire water and the water, or the firefighting and the water fighting breeds, when the format first started, pretty much nobody used these Pokemon, and the longer the format goes on, the higher their usage climbs. So we just have to see where they stop. They're really interesting because they have, honestly, water fighting and firefighting are both really good typing in my opinion. They each have really like niche, or not niche, but they have like a pretty wide swath of things they match up into. Having Intimidate is nice. The water form is really good into like Hydreigon. It's pretty decent into Dondozo because you resist water and you have Intimidate to lower its attack stat. It's good into Garchomp. The fire one is really good into Meowscarada. They're both pretty good into Goldango. Obviously the fire one is better. But yeah, so they're both really interesting Pokemon. I'm putting them in B conservatively, they might be higher. Caesar. Caesar's cool. Bullet Punch is a strong move. Priority is good. Underexplored in my opinion. There's not that many fire types right now, and Intimidate is also on the DL. So I think Caesar has potential, but no one's really figured it out yet, so we'll have to wait and see. Slowking, same reasoning as Slowbro, but this is especially bulky. I think physically bulky is probably better on Slowbro, since you're often going to be using it to like take attacks from Dondozo, but if you have other reasons for wanting a water and psychic trick room setter, then Slowking is pretty good as well. Pelipper, I love to bash on Pelipper. This is the first time to me that Pelipper's felt good in my opinion. It's actually, you can be trained to be pretty tanky. Having both Wide Guard and Tailwind is really nice. A lot of players are using Damp Rock with Rain, with Drizzle to set up the Rain for 8 turns, which is really like good. Hurricane is obviously a really powerful attack. It's actually good for once. I'm like #1 Pelipper hater, but it's actually good this time. Breloom, this Pokemon is just like good in a general case. It has some counters of course, but like it's an offensive Pokemon with Spore, so like yeah, it's like pretty nice. It also has priority with like Technician boosted Mach Punch and Bullet Seed, so it's actually a really good Pokemon right now. It's like difficult to play against. It does take the Focus Sash item most of the time, which is fine. It's better against slower teams because of Spore obviously, but and because it's relatively frail, but yeah, it's definitely a good Pokemon. Hariyama, like not good in a general case, but pretty solid as a way to get Trick Room up. Fake Out with Flame Orb Guts is really strong. Close Combat, Fake Out, Close Combat are on almost all sets, and then it's normally going to be Knockoff, Facade, Wide Guard, and maybe Earthquake. Like pick 2 of those 4 or 5 or whatever. But yeah, Hariyama's super good at trick room teams, not so strong outside. Sableye, a good general like disruptive Pokemon. Prankster Will-O-Wisp is always nice. Sableye gets Reflect and Light Screen, which I don't think it used to get, and it makes it actually like a pretty decent alternative to Grimmsnarl because it gets Will-O-Wisp and Fake Out and a couple other support moves, though Grimmsnarl also gets Fake Out. But yeah, pretty solid prankster Pokemon, good at disrupting Pokemon. And with Reflect and Light Screen, it actually feels a lot stronger. Salamence. So when I was building for Jaden, I was really interested in Salamence as a Pokemon. I couldn't really get it to work, but I think it has some potential. It's faster than Hydreigon, which is obviously valuable. It can be both physical or special. It has Tailwind. Like, it has some things going for it, but it's not the easiest Pokemon to make work. But listen, it's Salamence. It has a great ability, decent typing. It's better with Terastallization. It can set up with Dragon Dance. It can be physical or special. Like, it's definitely at least a B tier Pokemon. Staraptor, I think, is actually pretty decent. Kind of like Lucario. It's a fast Final Gambit Pokemon, but it also gets Brave Bird, Close Combat, Double Edge, and Intimidate. So it's got pretty decent stats. Good as a Choice Scarf user. Gets U-Turn. It's not going to be on every team, but like, it's a Pokemon that you like, if you see it in team preview, you can't just write it off. Pachirisu. I mean, listen, it's Pachirisu. Come on. Right now, Pachirisu is not in the strongest position. Again, kind of like we talked about with Raichu, like electric attacks aren't that common, so Volt Absorb isn't that valuable, but it's Pachirisu. Like, come on. You know, like, you gotta give it a little bit of respect. It's still like a decent follow me user. Gastrodon. So Gastrodon was really good last season, actually, even with all like the really powerful restricted Pokemon. Here, it's not quite as good. Scald is obviously removed from it, and Ground is a little bit. Ground and Ice just feel a little like less overwhelming than they did in the previous format. I mean, of course, you can still hit Dragons and Murkrow and stuff. Yawn is also not as good, which is a big deal. Yawn used to be super good. So Gastrodon is a solid Pokemon, but it kind of struggles to remove things from the field quickly enough, so I'm not putting it any higher, but Storm Drain is strong. Gastrodon's bulky. Honestly, the biggest issue I have with Gastrodon is the fact that Meowscarada is like top 5 in usage for sure. So it really makes it harder to use it. But I mean, with Terastallization, you can get around it. I'm sure a team will like make good use of Gastrodon. It's just not that easy. Bronzong, another good Trick Room setter. This is one of the better Trick Room setters in the game because it's just so bulky, and it also is the Steel type, which is obviously known for its resistances. With Terra Dark, you can also like turn off your Ghost and Dark weaknesses and get an immunity to Prankster, which is really good. Just really consistent in setting Trick Room up. It's a good Pokemon. Weavile, nice Fake Out support that's also offensive. I think that Weavile can be good right now because Ice is really strong offensively, so is Dark because of Goldengo, Murkrow, Hydreigon, Meowscarada, Garchomp. Lots of Pokemon that Ice and Dark are hitting for super effective damage, and with the Focus Sash, you can kind of avoid some of Weavile's shortcomings, which are mainly its low bulk. Also gets access to Feint, Icy Wind, so I think it's actually a pretty good Pokemon, and yeah, we'll definitely be seeing some teams with it. It can be a little difficult to use, and it's not great at coming in the back, so it's like a little inflexible in that regard, but it's still a super solid Pokemon. Magnezone, super good stats minus its speed. The 4x weakness is bad. Of course, you can get around this with Terastallization. I'm interested in Magnezone. It's kind of interesting that the #1 Steel type Pokemon, being Goldengo, cannot be trapped by Magnapole, but also Sturdy is a good ability as well. I'm sure this thing will be good. It matches up well into Goldengo and Murkrow. It's not terrible into Meowscarada because it's pretty physically bulky, and though it can't one-shot it, like being able to break Focus Sash and not take that much from Flower Trick or Knockoff is still pretty valuable. So I'm interested in it. We'll have to see how, like, if anybody uses it. It's not the easiest Pokemon to use, but I think it has enough going for it, even though it's not the fastest Pokemon, that it can still be pretty strong. Gallade. So Gallade is normally not considered a very good Pokemon, but in Scarlet and Violet, they gave it the new ability Sharpness, which raises its cutting moves by 50%. So that's moves like Psycho Cut, Night Slash, maybe Sacred Sword as well. And with that, Gallade actually starts doing a ton of damage. So it can be used as a Trick Room attacker, like set Trick Room and then do damage. It can also be used as a Choice Band attacker. One time I saw, like, I don't remember what it was, but Choice Band Psycho Cut, like, one-shot something that I was not expecting on a critical hit. You can also use Scope Lens if you're running Psycho Cut and Night Slash, because then you have 50% crit rate. It's an interesting Pokemon. I don't know if it's going to be, like, winning many events, but I think it could win an event, and I think it's probably underexplored. So yeah, I'm putting it in the B tier. Rotom Cut, solid Pokemon. It resists Meowscarada, which is good, though. You could also use Rotom Heat. I don't think it's the, I think it's the third strongest of the Rotoms, which is why I'm putting it in the third, like, as the third highest Rotom on the tier list. Will-O-Wisp is good. Thunderbolt. Leaf Storm is, like, it's not that it's bad, it's just that, like, a lot of the Pokemon that you're hitting with Leaf Storm, like, ground types you have like Garchomp, and then water types you have like Dondozo and Tatsugiri, and in a lot of cases Electric is also doing that. So it's not like the number one choice in my opinion, but it's still a solid Pokemon. Lilligant. So Lilligant's a Pokemon that really only works with Torkoal, but it is the best partner for Torkoal in a vacuum at least, because it has Sleep Powder, it has Chlorophyll, which obviously activates in the sun, which Torkoal sets up, and it also is After You, which allows Torkoal to move immediately after Lilligant, so it can potentially overwhelm opponents with After You Eruption. So it's a really difficult Pokemon to play against, in my opinion. I have a lot of trouble whenever I have to go against it. And yeah, definitely, it's not like, it can't be used on every team. Like Rotom Cut, Gallade, Breloom, these Pokemon are like pretty flexible. Lilligant isn't flexible, but it is strong, so I'm putting it in the B tier. Oranguru, another good Trick Room setter. Oranguru has never really had much success, is the truth, but it has pretty decent base stats. It's bulky enough. It makes good use of Terrestrialization because oftentimes it just wants to survive to get Trick Room up. And its signature move, Instruct, is very powerful, allowing your partner Pokemon to attack twice in the same turn, basically, and that's pretty valuable. It's most often right now paired with Bellybolt, who we'll get to in a second, but I think it has potential. Like, it's a little gimmicky, I think, because it's a little bit win more, but it's still a good Pokemon, and I think that it should be respected, so I'm putting it in B tier. I definitely wouldn't put it any lower. Salazzle. So again, Salazzle is a Pokemon who I normally like to hate on because I think it's bad, but it's not so bad right now. Fast, Fake Out, Poison, and Fire are both really good offensive types. Encore, Taunt, a lot of good supporting moves. Will-O-Wisp, yeah, just like a fast Fake Out user that resists Flower Trick and is overall like pretty solid. I've also seen one with Acid Spray, for example, so it has a lot that it can do. And yeah, again, outspeeds Dondozo at +2 as well, which is pretty valuable. So I think Salazzle is actually legit. Serena hasn't had any success yet, but it also, like we talked about, has Bruxish's ability, only renamed. It's called Queenly Majesty. Serena has seen success in the past. I think it's kind of tough because, like, again, the main grass type that the format centers around is Meowscarada, but I think that there's probably unique things that Serena can do as well. So we'll have to see. I think it has potential though, and it definitely shouldn't be below B tier. Lycanroc Dusk. So, or Dawn, I don't know, midday, I don't, one of them. One of the Lycanrocs, the good one. This has actually seen a lot of success. There's a really scary team that uses Tyranitar and Lycanroc, and the Lycanroc is Endure with Focus Sash and Endeavor. And the idea is that you have 1 HP, you're like the fastest thing in the format, and you can Endeavor a Pokemon once you get to 1 HP, and Rock Slide is just really scary. Like, fast Rock Slide is just like, you just start rolling dice, and if you flinch, you can just win games immediately. So yeah, I think Lycanroc is pretty scary, all things considered. And I think it's a good Pokemon, and yeah, like, B might even be underestimating it. It's really good. Dreadnought is kind of the Lycanroc of rain teams. If Lycanroc is the Lycanroc of sand teams, Dreadnought is the Lycanroc of rain teams. Scary Pokemon, often uses the Life Orb item, Liquidation, Rock Slide, normally Ice Spinner and Protect. Just like a really solid Pokemon, can use an offensive Terra type or a defensive one like Grass. Pairs really well with Pelipper, exerts a lot of pressure immediately. Hard to deal with, hard to switch into, just overall solid Pokemon. B tier. Mimikyu. This could have gone in A tier, but I think it's a little bit too niche for me to put it any higher. It's a good Pokemon though. Right now, a Life Orb Mimikyu set is actually picking up in popularity with like Play Rough, Shadow Sneak, and Shadow Claw and Protect. It's really good. You can obviously run supportive Mimikyu with like Taunt, Will-O-Wisp, Trick Room as well. Overall, a really solid Pokemon. Its Disguise is a really nice ability, especially like Mimikyu is benefiting a lot right now because Intimidate has fallen out of favor, as I've mentioned a couple times. And with Intimidate not being as popular, like a Pokemon like Mimikyu, who kind of has like an okay attack stat with like a Life Orb, it has like a good attack stat, but after Intimidate, it's back to being kind of bad. Without Intimidate, it's actually able to output a lot of damage, and so it's really kind of shining right now for that reason. And it's relatively fast, matches up well into Hydreigon, which is obviously a huge deal. So yeah, Mimikyu in the B tier. Corviknight, another Pokemon that hasn't seen a ton of success but has a lot of potential. It's like a bulky Tailwind setter, but it's got good defensive typing, and it has Recovery. So it has Tailwind and Roost, which allows it to, I don't know, just be really like difficult to remove from the field, especially when paired with good offensive Pokemon. And It can run Rocky Helmet, which is really strong right now because there's a lot of Pokemon that do physical or contact damage, especially Mouse Hold. Yeah, it's overall like a really solid Pokemon. I wouldn't put it any higher, but like it could definitely win tournaments. Quaquaval. Good Pokemon, a little bit difficult to use. Has some of the issues we've talked about with setup Pokemon like Haze, but it's not as prevalent because Quaquaval doesn't need to set up to do damage. Moxie plus Aqua Step does a lot of damage, or Moxie plus Aqua Step gives you the ability to potentially boost both your speed and your attack stat if you get a KO, which allows it to snowball. The problem is that its bulk is not good. It's not great. So if it's ever out of position, it can very easily find itself like just fainting, or like if it really needs to come in the back, and like pick up opponents once they've already taken some damage. But I think it's a good Pokemon. I definitely think it's underexplored right now, so I'm putting it in the B tier. Espathra. Espathra is another good Pokemon going in the B tier, obviously. Lumina Crash is really good. Speed Boost is really good. It gets a couple of decent support moves. Hypnosis, I think, is one that I saw. Reflect and Light Screen with dual screens. Difficult to use. It's really struggling because there's a ton of dark types right now, which makes psychic types lives harder. There's also a fair bit of steel types as well, which all of that kind of works against Espathra. But if it can figure it out, I think that it could be really strong. So I'm still putting it in the B tier. Burgerath. Okay, this is a very decent Trick Room setter as well. So basically, if we look at the Trick Room setters we've added, we have super bulky Trick Room setter in Bronzong. Good typing Trick Room and good typing. Good typing specifically for Dondozo, Trick Room setters in Slowbro and Slowking. Signature move, Trick Room setter Oranguru, and then really good ability Trick Room setter in Farigiraf. So Trick Room, obviously, the idea of Trick Room is that you are setting up Trick Room, you're taking an investment, normally taking a fair bit of damage to set Trick Room up, and then once you have Trick Room up, you have the next 4 turns to do as much damage as possible and overwhelm the opponent. And one of the counters to Trick Room is priority attack. So if you take too much damage during Trick Room, then you might find your turns wasted because your opponent will be able to pick off your Pokemon and move before you do, even though you set Trick Room up with priority attacks. And so being able to turn off all priority attacks is actually pretty valuable with Farigiraf. Armor Tail, same as Queenly Majesty, same as Dazzling. Yeah, it's a good ability. Farigiraf, normal and psychic is pretty good typing because you're only weak to dark and bug not normally being relevant. It can also be like an offensive set, like there's some like Tailwind with like Hyper Voice, Roach Spray sets as well. It's a pretty flexible Pokemon. It's honestly pretty strong, does a good job of playing like utility and some damage as well. I like it. I'm putting it in the B tier. Arboliva. Okay, Arboliva hasn't seen much play. I believe in it. It's very strong. It has 2 good abilities. It has a good move pool. I believe in it. There's no results yet. I'm still putting it in the B tier. I think it's good. Bellybolt. So this is a Pokemon that actually has seen some results. So there's a team that uses Oranguru with Bellybolt. The idea is normally like Mouse Hold Oranguru lead. They follow me, set Trick Room up, and then Oranguru uses Bulldoze into Bellybolt, which activates Parabolic Charge. No, which activates Electromorphosis and the Weakness Policy and drops its speed. So then Bellybolt has -1 speed, +2 special attack, and then it uses, and it's charged. So it's doing 3 times damage. Often it's Terra Electric as well for another damage boost. And then it uses Parabolic Charge to damage all of the field, but Oranguru's Telepathy makes it immune to Parabolic Charge. And then it heals back up. And then next turn it's just Parabolic Charge and Instruct, and it's just impossible to KO because it's healing so much, and it's really strong. So it's a good Pokemon in that sense, but it's a really specific setup to get it to work, and so I'm not putting it any higher, but I do think you need to respect it in team building or else you'll lose to it. So yeah, it makes its way into the B tier, which I think is fair. So Titan's a Pokemon I personally believe a lot in. It has Belly Drum, it has Ice Shard, it's also good as a Slush Rush user, it has like really good stats all across the board. Suffers from Murkrow, or from Dondozo syndrome I should call it, where Haze is popular and so is Oblivious, so it's not gonna be like overwhelming opponents like it could without Dondozo being so popular. But it's a really strong Pokemon, and I think like it has the stats and move pool to back up this placement. Cyclizar should be C tier. That's my bad. I like Cyclizar a lot, but I can't justify putting it in the B tier. Its stats are pretty bad. Shed-Tail and Regenerator is good, but like Shed-Tail, even though you give up half your HP, still only creates a 25% HP substitute. So like it's not that good at the end of the day. And yeah, like it's a decent Pokemon, but it's not amazing. Palmont. So I thought Palmont was bad for a while. I've changed my mind. I think it's good. Fake out Revival Blessing is just a really scary combo, because if you bring Palmont in after a Pokemon is KO'd, you get to play this really dangerous guessing game of like, okay, like should I just attack the Palmont and potentially eat a Fake Out, or should I protect my Pokemon so I don't eat the Fake Out, and then they just get Revival Blessing and get to bring back a Pokemon for free? It's kind of tricky to say, like, or to play against. Gets Close Combat, gets Mach Punch, and gets Double Shock, all of which are pretty valuable offensive tools as well. Really needs the Focus Sash is my main criticism of it, but like that's a lot of Pokemon need the Focus Sash. It's not fair to dock up points for that, so I'm putting it in B tier. But this is like a B tier Pokemon that's like easily capable of winning tournaments. I just don't think it's like easy enough to play to put it any higher. Flamigo. Listen, Co-Star's a great ability. It has a lot of potential. The problem is Dondozo syndrome, right? Like again, Dondozo Syndrome, but I still think Flamigo's ability is so good that it warrants a B placement on the list. Kilowattrel is a really good Pokemon. There's not that many electric types at present in the format, so being able to have electric coverage is actually really nice. Fast, Tailwind Setter, also has Wind Power and Competitive, which are two abilities that can boost the special attack, one more consistent than the other. But yeah, fast Tailwind Setter is actually pretty valuable. So this is like nice. I like Kilowattrel as an alternative to Murkrow. It does kind of need the Focus Sash item, but like, yeah, like it's a good Pokemon that can set Tailwind up, and it actually has offensive presence and is a bit faster. Like it's better in the Tailwind mirror a lot of the time, depending on the Murkrow set, of course. And it also does a ton of damage to Murkrow as well. So I like it for that reason. Garganacl. So Garganacl was popular at first and has since fallen off. It has the stats to be good. It has a good signature move. It has a really good ability in Purifying Salt. It just struggles to kind of do damage quickly enough, but I think on the right team, it could definitely shine. So I'm putting it in B tier. I think it's fair. I think most people would agree this is a B tier Pokemon, but it could, again, if somebody cracks how to really make the most of this Pokemon, it could do super well. Glimmora. No one has really found a way to make Glimmora work yet, but its ability is actually surprisingly good, and it has a really good special attack stat, and it has good coverage, and its main weakness is that its typing is pretty mediocre. It has two of the worst types in the game as its typing, but with Terastallization, specifically Terra Grass, it actually ends up being a really good it ends up being like a really good Pokemon. So I think it's actually really underexplored right now, and I'm putting it in the B tier. Tinkaton. Tinkaton does, its stats suck, but it's the best typing in the game. It has Fake Out. It has a good signature move, Gigaton Hammer. It gets Knockoff for support, Play Rough. It has a lot going for it, and it has a lot working in its favor. I'm putting it in the B tier. Dox. Nope. Doxbun. Doxbun. I really thought Doxbun, I don't think Doxbun is great. Let me preface by saying this. I think I had it in the D tier when I initially made my list, but it's not fair to put it in the D tier. I'm putting it in the B tier because if you're unprepared against it, you can definitely lose. Basically, for those of you who don't know, Doxbun's ability, Well-Baked Body, makes it not only immune to fire type attacks, it also gives it a +2 boost in its defense whenever it would take damage from a fire type attack. So you can do stuff with Lava Plume and Side Flare Blitz and Side Flamethrower and stuff like that. Makes it immune to Will-O-Wisp, of course, as well. It's a great ability, but the problem is that Doxbun kind of struggles to do anything while it's on the field. It can support the team with Snarl, it can use Play Rough, it can use Body Press if it gets a boost. But if the opponent doesn't give you the boost and you fail to get the boost yourself, like, it just kind of ends up doing nothing. So I don't love it. I don't think it's the best Pokemon ever made. I do like it though. I think it's a decent. Okay, I don't like it either, but I think that I need to respect it because I think that like if you're unprepared for it, you can definitely lose. So yeah, so I'm putting it in B tier. Toedscroll, last Pokemon in the B tier. I initially thought this thing was garbage because Mycelium Might is a trash ability, but Toedscroll has really good stats. It's really bulky. It's a good user of Terastallization. It has Rage Powder and Spore, just like Amoonguss, and it also has Trick Room, and it has a bit more offensive prowess thanks to like its typing and its special attack stat being not good, but you know, Ground is a good offensive type, so you can do like stuff like Spore, Trick Room, Rage Powder, Earth Power, or Leaf Storm. Maybe it gets Pollen Puff, I don't know, but you probably wouldn't want to run that. But yeah, basically it's actually a pretty decent Pokemon, all things considered. And yeah, I think I underestimated it in the past, and I'm excited to try and use it on a team because Spore is a really rare attack, and so it'll be interesting to kind of see what Pokemon can like make use of it. You know what I mean? Or like I should say, how to bring out Toedscroll's full potential, because it has a lot of potential. And that's everything in the B tier. And I think there's a lot of good Pokemon in here, so I won't be surprised to see a bunch of these pop up at tournaments and doing well in the future. Okay, now we're into the A tier. And for this tier, pretty much everything here is just straight up great. The S tier is for Pokemon who are broken and the best in the format, but the A tier is full of Pokemon who are very, very good. When I was looking at Pokemon that I was putting in the A tier, I noticed that most of them were either like really good in a general case, like they can fit on most teams, they're really flexible, they are like almost always going to be valuable, or they're Pokemon who are like single-handedly responsible for one thing, like doing one thing really well. So to kick off the A tier, I'm going to put Arcanine. So I've been saying that I think Arcanine is great for a while. I said I thought it was the best returning Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet, and I think I was wrong. I basically didn't understand, you know, I think in a vacuum, this might have made sense, but Arcanine is not as good as I thought it was because Intimidate is not as good as I thought it was going to be, and that's a big factor in why Arcanine is so good. So it's still a good Pokemon. It's very flexible. Intimidate, Snarl, Will-O-Wisp can also be more offensive with Flare Blitz, Extreme Speed, Close Combat, Wild Charge, Play Rough. It has a lot of things it can do well, but it's not really dominating the metagame. It's not even really that much of a presence in the metagame, so I'm putting it in A tier because it's still a great Pokemon, but it's not broken. It doesn't seem broken at the moment. Gyarados. So Gyarados kind of took a little bit to show up, but when it did show up, it showed up pretty well. Another mistake that I said that I thought Gyarados' best Terra type was going to be Ground because it can use Earthquake and it's immune to Electric and it resists Rock and it's just all these great things. Gyarados are running Terra Flying, and I actually agree with this. I don't think that's a mistake. It's because basically Gyarados struggles with Grass types, and if you run Waterfall Earthquake, you just lose to Grass types. With Terra Flying, you can once again, for the third generation in a row, use the generation's unique mechanics to get around the fact that they will not give Gyarados a flying type attack. So it was Supersonic Sky Strike, and then it was Max Airstream, and now it's Terra Blast. So With water and flying coverage, it's really difficult to switch into Gyarados. Some Gyarados run Clear Amulet, some run Life Orb, some run Lumberry. It's a good Pokemon. You still get access to Intimidate. It's mostly a Dragon Dance set. Great Pokemon, useful in a lot of different scenarios, like can set up itself, can sweep teams, just really good. Dragonite. Dragonite's another really heavy hitter right now. At first, the meta was like Choice Band, Inner Focus. A lot more people are running multi-scale. The reason people like Dragonite right now is because it has extreme speed, the strongest priority attack in the game, at least the one that's commonplace. I don't think anything is stronger than that. And with Terra Normal, you can actually do a lot of damage with extreme speed. And if you add on Inner Focus, you can't be intimidated or flinched. That is not really relevant with extreme speed. Or you can run multi-scale and Assault Vest, or you can mix and match multi-scale Choice Band, you know, multi-scale Inner Focus. You can't do multi-scale Inner Focus. What am I saying? Multi-scale Assault Vest, excuse me, or Choice Band multi-scale. You know what I'm saying. Basically, Dragonite is a really bulky Pokemon, especially with Terra Normal, giving it only one weakness to fighting, especially with multi-scale, making it almost impossible to OHKO from full HP. So it always is getting at least one attack off. Great coverage moves: Ice Spinner, Dragon Claw, Earthquake, Thunder Punch. There's more that I'm forgetting about. It's really bulky. It's got a really strong attack. It's really hard to remove. Even, you know, normally what you could do is run like, I don't know, like Psychic Terrain and at least counter extreme speed, but with Ice Spinner, they can actually remove the terrain. So it's a really good Pokemon. It's doing really well right now, and it's not broken, but it is really good. It's also really flexible. Azumarill. So Azumarill's funny because it's always been like, whenever the power level is low enough, Azumarill tends to do well because huge power is so good, and you know, it gets priority with Aqua Jet. But it's funny because there's a second Azumarill set that's popped up, which is like Sap, Sipper, Perish Song, Icy Wind stuff. And the idea is that it's a great check to Dondozo because like, it is, you know, resists water, is immune to dragon, is pretty, you train it to be pretty bulky and have leftovers. You just switch it in, Parasong, and then stall for a couple turns, and then Dondozo just dies. And then, yeah, you're in good shape. And so it's like kind of a nice check all to Dondozo. A lot more are running like Assault Vest or Choice Band or Life Orb. Not so much Belly Drum for the reason that we've talked about Dondozo Syndrome, because Haze just stops it, Unaware just stops it. But as an attacker, Play Rough, Liquidation, Aqua Jet is a really strong combination of moves. Azumarill is a really high attack stat. Again, Intimidate not really being present lets Azumarill shine even more. So yeah, very good Pokemon. Tyranitar, another very good Pokemon. Most Tyranitar right now are running the Assault Vest and Terra Flying, which is totally fair. You get resistance to fighting, you get an immunity to ground, and Terra Blast is really nice because grass and fighting Pokemon like Meowscarada and Annihilape and Amoonguss are all hit for super effective with Terra Blast. It's a really difficult Pokemon to take out because without a 4x weakness, it has ridiculous stats. It is funny because it gives up its Sandstorm special defense boost, but Assault Vest kind of helps compensate for that a little bit. Very, very strong, good in a number of teams. Underexplored, has a lot more potential than people have found, but yeah, so far that's where we're at with it. Torkoal. I'm putting Torkoal in the A tier. I thought Torkoal was going to be one of the absolute best new Pokemon, or best returning Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet. It's hard to use. Like Armarouge makes it difficult to use. Tyranitar makes it difficult to use. Like dragons, there's a lot of dragons right now that make it difficult to use. There's some wide guard users. It's an uphill battle, and rain is actually a thing. It's not the most common thing, but it is a thing. So yeah, Torkoal's like not in the best spot right now, but it has so much raw power. I think it's really the fact that like Trick Room is kind of in a weird spot right now. Like Trick Room is not as good as we expected it to be. Amoonguss being super common plays a bit of a role in that as well, but Torkoal struggles a little bit, but it's still an incredibly powerful Pokemon, especially with Terra. Like Terra Fire Eruption will just like delete Pokemon. So I don't know. It's not doing super well right now, but I still think Torkoal can be good. Abomasnow. No. All the weather setters except for Pelipper are A tier, and Pelipper is in the B tier. So like, yeah, Abomasnow is way better now, especially with Terastallization and the buff to Snow. It's actually super bulky. Aurora Veil is really good. Ice is a great offensive type with all the dragons. You can turn off your 4x weakness. Giga Drain is really strong as well into like Dondozo. Overall, a really, really solid Pokemon in a really good spot. Also underexplored. I think weather in general is a bit underexplored right now. Yeah, I think weather in general is super underexplored right now, and I think that will change as the season progresses because all the weather setters have a ton of. This is the best. This is the most balanced and the best the weather setters have been as like ever, I think. And even though I put Pelipper below the others, I think Rain is actually at number 1 or number 2 in terms of weather viability. So yeah, so the weathers are incredibly well balanced right now, and I'm sure we'll be seeing more of them. Rotom Heat and Rotom Wash. Let's talk about these together. Bulky electric type Pokemon. We've talked about the value of electric types. We talked about the value of Will-O-Wisp. Overheat and Hydro Pump are like good coverage moves in terms of what they hit. Rotom Heat dealing with Amoonguss is really valuable. I like the Rotom Heat is good into a Meowscarada, so I would rank it a little bit above Rotom Wash. But yeah, just like solid Pokemon that fit on most teams, have good stats. Like not broken by any means. We're seeing a lot more like bulky Rotom and choice item Rotom, mostly choice specs Rotom, than we are like nasty plot Rotom, which I think makes sense because again, the Nozo syndrome, which I've coined over the course of this video. But yeah, very solid Pokemon. They're not going to let you down. They're always going to be good. Like multiple good Terra options for them. Yeah, I think they're both solid. Gothitelle. I love Gothitelle. It's difficult to use. That's the truth. Shadow Tag is an incredible ability. One of the most broken abilities in the game. Gothitelle gets Fake Out now. It kind of struggles to pick 4 moves to run. I've seen some Hypnosis sets, which I don't personally like very much because I think it's inconsistent. Gothitelle's hard to use. A lot of players that like to use Gothitelle like to use it with like a slow, bulky playstyle, like multiple Intimidate Pokemon or Snarl or stuff like that, kind of like gradually like trapping the opponent in and like lowering their stats and then dealing with them from there. I don't love that style. It is having success though. I do think Gothitelle is like the ability to trap your opponent in with Shadow Tag is just so valuable that like I think Gothitelle is another Pokemon that's really underexplored and will definitely have some big wins as the season progresses. Volcarona, another Pokemon with multiple sets it can run. It can be Quiver Dance with like Quiver Dance, Heat Wave, Terra Grass, Giga Drain, or it can be like Rage Powder, Struggle Bug, stuff like that. I think it still gets Tailwind as well, though I haven't seen any of that. Flame Body's in a really good place right now with Meowscarada and Annihilate and like I mean like a lot of the like Dragonites and Azumarill. Like there's a lot of physical attackers that you would love to get a burn on and that's nice. Redirection is always good. Struggle Bug is good. It's just so good into Meowscarada, which is really nice. Also good into Goldango, which is really popular. Not bad into Murkrow either. Like yeah, just like a really solid Pokemon that can like do multiple things and does kind of a lot of things well. Next up is Talonflame. So Talonflame is another Pokemon that I love to hate, but I have to pay it respect. This is actually quite good right now. It's another fast Tailwind setter. It has pseudo priority Tailwind, where it has priority Tailwind until it loses full HP, because Gale Wings only works when it has full HP. It also has fast Will-O-Wisp and fast Taunt though, which are very valuable. So normally you're not going to run Brave Bird, Will-O-Wisp, Taunt, and Tailwind, though some people will. But having the ability to customize its supporting moves for your team is really valuable. Again, faster than Meowscarada it's the only Pokemon that's naturally faster than Meowscarada on our list, I think, except for Dragapult. Yeah, but it's the only Pokemon that's naturally faster than Meowscarada, which is a big deal because you want to be able to burn that before it attacks, or Brave Bird it to finish it off, even if you've lost your Gale Wings. So yeah, Talonflame's in a really good spot right now. I'm curious to see if people like where it lands. Basically, is it going to be a more offensive set or a more defensive set? What items are run? Maybe like a little underexplored, not so much as a lot of the other Pokemon, but like, yeah, I think it's in a good space right now. Sylveon. There's a case to put Sylveon in S tier. I don't find it overwhelming enough to justify an S tier placement. Just a super solid Pokemon. If you look at this list, like there's not many fairies, right? We have we have Azumarill. So there's Azumarill, and then in the B tier right now, there's like nothing, right? Fairy Pokemon, there's Tinkaton, who's not that good. It's a B tier Pokemon. Sylveon's really good. It's consistent fairy damage. It's relatively bulky, especially on the special side. It's a good user of Terrestrialization. It's a great user of Terra Blast. What else? Has priority with Quick Attack, has Disruption with Yawn, has Helping Hand, good move pool. Just overall super solid Pokemon. Can use Throat Spray well, which is good. Yeah, I like Sylveon a lot. I think it's a really good Pokemon. Yeah, like it's not perfect, but again, with all the dragons and Murkrow running around, it's really good. And DB. Great supporting Pokemon. Indeed, he would already have been a good supporting Pokemon in a lower power level format already. And the fact that they gave it Trick Room as well, debatably whether that was intentional or not, I think it wasn't, but here we are. You can get Trick Room in DD and it is tournament legal, so it is what it is. But yeah, Follow Me, Helping Hand, Trick Room. Doesn't get Expanding Force, but that's fine. Dazzling Gleam, Psychic, Protect. It's just like a really good supporting Pokemon, really hard to remove. Psychic and Normal, as we mentioned, is a great defensive type. The support is just so valuable, and in a format where it's the only terrain user, like there's no Misty terrain users. Electric terrain is Pincurchin, doesn't count, and then Grassy terrain is Arboliva, which also doesn't count. It's having uncontested Psychic terrain is really valuable. It doesn't even need to be paired with like Armarouge, can be paired with a bunch of different Pokemon. It's honestly an amazing support Pokemon, one of the better in the format, and yeah, I think it's really strong. Grimmsnarl. Okay, Grimmsnarl. A tier. Like just a solid supporting Pokemon. Reflect and Light Screen, Fake Out Thunder Wave, Play Rough, Sucker Punch, Trick. Lots of things it can do. It does Grimmsnarl things. It's a good Pokemon. Yeah, like it's nice to have a support Pokemon that actually has value in attacking as well, because Spirit Break is so strong, and also lower special attack, and Sucker Punch can also be used as well for some priority. So really, really solid Pokemon. It's not doing as well right now, I think, because Goldango is super popular, but it's still pretty popular and still really good. So yeah, I'm putting it in the A tier. Dragapult. Dragapult's interesting because it doesn't have a good way of accessing its ghost type attacks because of like no Dynamax. Phantom Force is really exploitable, obviously, but it's a really good user of Choice Band. So Choice Band, Clear Body, Dragon Darts, Terra Dragon, Dragapult does a ton of damage, and if you protect in front of it, you like basically even if you let both your Pokemon take the attack, it's like still a lot of damage on 2 of your Pokemon. And if you don't protect in front, or if you do protect in front of it, then your partner Pokemon takes both darts, which will normally KO most things in the format. So Yeah, really solid offensive Pokemon. It's, again, one of the few Pokemon faster than Meowscarada, though of course it has to worry about Sucker Punch. Can use U-turn really well, especially on the Choice Band set. Can be special. Can also use Infiltrator to ignore Reflect and Light Screen. Can use Will-O-Wisp. I played against a Will-O-Wisp one. I saw one that had Curse, I guess, to beat Dondozo. So lots of different things you can do with it. It's a good Pokemon that has a number of different sets, and I think that as the format progresses, we'll be seeing more and more Dragapult. Skeleturge. Putting Skeleturge in the A tier as well. Very solid Pokemon. Sets up with Torch Song, can run like a couple different Terra types. Normally Grass and Fairy are used. Has a couple different moves it can run. Normally it's like 4 of Protect, Will-O-Wisp, Slack Off, Torch Song, Terra Blast, and Shadow Ball. You can kind of customize it to your team for that, like in that way. Really difficult to deal like with. If you let it get out of hand, it will just totally blow through your team. Unaware is an amazing ability in a format with Dondozo, so that's also a major plus. But yeah, like, no, it's like a super solid Pokemon that does really well. Palafin. Oh boy, okay. I have to put Palafin in the A tier. I've been saying this is the best new Pokemon for a while, but like it's so difficult to use. I still really believe in this thing. I still think it's like super good, but it's like it's hard to use, and I'm not gonna lie about that. Like I really do think this thing has so much potential, but like it's just not getting results right now, and the results that it is getting is mostly on kind of more gimmicky range style teams. So I can't put it any higher. I really want to, but I just can't. So yeah, it's a great Pokemon when it transforms. Getting it to transform is a problem. I am sure that if someone cracks the code of this thing, it will like definitely pay dividends, but it's hard to use. It's really hard to use. Excalibur. Okay, another Pokemon. I said this was like really good as well. One of the best new Pokemon. I still hold true to that. This is still one of the best new Pokemon, and unlike Palafin, people have started figuring out how to use this thing, which is exciting. So there's a couple sets right now. There's Dragon Dance, there's Swords Dance, there's Loaded Dice, there's a couple different things you can do with it. Ice Shard, Glaive Rush. There's a number of different sets that are floating around. Terra Water, Terra Dragon, Life Orb, Citrus Berry. There's a couple of different things. It has such good stats. It is good. It's a good Pokemon, and I'm glad that people are figuring out how to use it. It needs more development. It needs more time in the oven. So right now I'm putting it in A tier. Could end up in the S tier easily, though. I think it's very strong. Armarouge. Let's do Ceruledge first, actually. Ceruledge. Good Pokemon. Kind of in an awkward spot right now, in all honesty, because it's slow. There's a lot of dark types. Those are the two main reasons. Bitterblade is a great attack. Bulk Up was the main set that people were using for a while. Dondozo Syndrome means that it's not as good anymore. I think this thing is really good, but there's a lot of Pokemon that are popular right now that like kind of just nullify it. Gholdengo, Garchomp, Hydreigon, Murkrow. It has a lot of problems in the Pokemon, like in the meta right now. So putting it in A tier for now, but we'll revisit it. It could definitely end up being better than A tier later. And we're gonna move Armarouge over because I think this is an S tier Pokemon. Spoilers. So all we have left now are the S tier Pokemon. Now these are the most broken Pokemon in the format. These are the Pokemon that, I mean, they're great, right? They're so incredible. These are like the ones that the format is revolving around. Yeah, and they're really strong. So starting off, we have it's not even a joke. We have Murkrow. We've been talking about it all list. It's the only Pokemon in the game with Prankster and Tailwind on the same Pokemon. It gets, on top of that, it gets Haze. Very good attack at getting rid of Dondozo and all the other setup Pokemon. Gets Taunt, gets Foul Play, gets Icy Wind, gets Brave Bird, gets Quash, gets Screech, gets Torment. A number of good supporting moves that you can run on it. It's just a very good Pokemon. It's very bulky with Eviolite. It has a couple Terra types it can run, though it normally doesn't Terra, but it can. It's really strong. It's a very good support Pokemon. Prankster Tailwind is just very good. Garchomp. I mean, it's Garchomp. Come on. Like, amazing stats. Faster than almost all Pokemon in the format. Really bulky, really strong. Can use Life Orb. Great user of Terra Ground for offense. Can use Swords Dance. Choice Band, Life Orb, Lumberry, Clear Amulet, Habanberry, Citrus Berry, Scarf is even an option. Really solid Pokemon. Can set up or just do immediate damage. Likes Terrestrialization, doesn't need to Terrestrialize. Great Pokemon, honestly really good. Amoonguss. Okay, Amoonguss is really good. It was already good in most other formats, and now it has Terrestrialization. So you want to taunt it, Terra Dark. You want to Flare Blitz it, Terra Water. It's very powerful. Pollen Puff is actually really good because number one, the power level of the format is lower, so Pokemon aren't getting like blown up by Kyogre Water Spread every turn. So that's good because it can heal up its partners, but also Meowscarada and dark types in general are like all very common right now. And so Pollen Puff actually ends up being a lot of offensive pressure against teams that have like Meowscarada plus, I don't know, like Hydreigon plus, you know, grass type, whatever. Yeah, so it actually ends up being a pretty decent damage dealer as well, especially with how many frail Pokemon. Clear Smog for Dondozo. Yeah, like just a Rage Powder I didn't even talk about. Spore, super broken Pokemon. Maybe the best support Pokemon in the game. Probably not ranked number one because of Murkrow, but like it's up there. It's very good. Hydreigon. I mean, a lot of the format revolves around Hydreigon. It's incredibly powerful. It has a number of sets it can run. We've already seen Scarf, Specs, Life Orb, Assault Vest, Scope, Lens, Focus Energy, Habenberry, probably some other stuff as well that I'm forgetting about. Super strong, has a number of good teras it can run. Steel with Flash Cannon, Fire with Heat Wave, Poison. There's just does so many things well. It puts out a ton of pressure. If you ignore it, you get blown up. There's a number, there's so many sets it can run, because like its main weakness was that the fact that its defensive typing was not bad, but it was, 4 times weak to Fairy. The fact that it can just terrestrialize and not have any of its weaknesses anymore is a big deal. It's a really big deal. So yeah, it's incredible right now, and it's doing super, super well. Meowscarada, putting this in the S tier. I've had this in the A tier in the past, but it's so good. It's just a super flexible Pokemon. Focus Sash, Knockoff, Flower Trick, Sucker Punch. Like I mentioned, it's one of the fastest Pokemon in the format behind Talonflame and Dragapult. Yeah, like Knockoff is super good. Critical hits from Flower Trick are very valuable. Being able to just like gain infinite utility basically, or ignore Intimidate and ignore Reflect. Is very, very valuable. Knockoff is good. Sucker Punch is good. Can run U-turn, can run Play Rough. Skill Swap run sometimes to counter Dondozo, even if they terrestrialize. Can Terra, doesn't have to. Overgrow's a great ability. You can also do wonky stuff with Protean. Not that that's as good, but I think Overgrow's better. But yeah, like you can. Incredible move pool, great offensive stats, like just so good. Such a good Pokemon. Super flexible too. Works on like so many teams. Dondozo and Tatsugiri. A lot of the format revolves around Dondozo and Tatsugiri specifically. If you don't have an answer to Dondozo and Tatsugiri, you're probably going to lose. Like, that's just plain and simple. So every team needs at least one, if not multiple answers to Dondozo Tatsugiri. And we kind of see it in the S tier, right? Haze Murkrow, Spore Clear Smogamungus, Focus Energy Hydreigon to crit through the special defense boosts, Flower Trick, Meowscarada with Knockoff. I mentioned Skill Swap. Like, a lot of the format revolves around these two specifically. They're incredibly powerful. Even if you know what's coming, they're still hard to stop. Dondozo has a ton of Terra types it can run. Steel, Grass, Flying, Dragon, Ghost is even an option. Tatsugiri is normally Choice Scarf, sometimes Focus Sash, fast Icy Wind support, Draco Meteor, stuff like that. Just a very potent duo that, like, yeah, I mean, it makes sense that the whole format is revolving around it pretty much. Maushold. So Maushold, at first, people were like using Population Bomb, and then because Maushold's Population Bomb was so strong, the format kind of evolved to counter that. So Rocky Helmet and Amoonguss picked up, Rough Skin Garchomp, obviously, more Ghost types, more Steel types, Terra Ghost picked up on some mons, and Maushold fell off a little bit. Now it's back, and now it's not even running Population Bomb. It's actually not running any moves that do damage beyond Beat Up. It's just doing this very bulky Protect, Follow Me, Beat Up, and Baby Doll Eyes, Faint, something like that normally as the last move. Very powerful. The reason they want Beat Up is they're pairing it with Annihilate. There's another S tier Pokemon. Let's put Annihilate here. Very, very, very good Pokemon. So basically, Rage Fist is a very broken move, and people have figured out that, yeah, wow, this move is actually super bulky. So what they do is they make both these Pokemon super tanky, like incredibly bulky. They use Friend Guard, Maushold to protect Annihilate. They don't even run investment in Annihilate, but after a Beat Up, Rage Fist is at 250 base power. They have a defensive Terra option on either Mon. They have Friend Guard available. They have a recovery item on Annihilate. Nearly impossible to deal with, and you get so much bulk for your trouble, and yeah, like, it's just an option, right? And if you don't even need to beat up yourself, they're attacking Annihilate for you. You can run bulk up to get even more bulk and to become even like more offense as well. These two are incredibly powerful together, and it's not even the only set that Annihilate can run. Annihilate also is really good with Choice Scarf, fast Final Gambit, one of the highest, the highest HP Final Gambit user in the game. U-turn, Close Combat, Shadow Claw, or Phantom Force, or Rage Fist, or whatever. Really, really, really strong Pokemon. Very, very, very good. Next up, Goldango. Arguably the strongest new Pokemon. Arguably, not factual, but arguably. Very, very strong. Make It Rain with Terra Steel and Choice Specs does ridiculous damage. Can KO so many things. Can run Life Orb, can run Nasty Plot, can run Citrus Berry, Leftovers, Air Balloon, Weakness Policy. Weakness Policy is actually picking up right now, funnily enough, but yeah, can run Thunderbolt, Dazzling Gleam, Trick with the Choice Spec set. Choice Scarf is picking up. Just outputs a ton of damage. Has a stupidly broken ability. Has an incredible typing. Can use Terrestrialization to further its defense and its offense. This thing is absolutely broken. Armarouge next. So let's talk about Armarouge. I'm putting Armarouge in the S tier. This one's debatable. This one's on the fence. Very strong Pokemon. The only expanding force user in the game. Has another signature attack called Armor Cannon. Can easily sweep through teams. There's a couple sets it can run. It can run Trick Room with Indeedee. It can run Weak Armor, Weakness Policy with like U-turn and Terra Psychic, and switch between Indeedee and get Expanding Force with +2 speed, +2 special attack. Wide Guard, Trick Room, number of different things that this thing can do. It's very, very good. It's just like a nice, consistent Pokemon. Yes, it can overwhelm the opponent with Indeedee. It doesn't even need Indeedee to succeed, in my opinion. Like, I think it's totally fine without it. Not, you know, like, I mean, it obviously likes Indeedee as well, but it's not necessary. Yeah, good user of Terrestrialization. Like, Wide Guard, as I mentioned, is super strong. Just a great Pokemon overall. And last but not least, Kingambit. This thing is a little underplayed right now, I think in part because there's a fair number of Pokemon that do well into it, but it's just broken. It has unbelievably good stats. It has two great abilities. It has a number of different items it can run: Assault Vest, Citrus Berry, Black Glasses, Life Orb, maybe Choice Band, probably not Choice Band, but you get the gist. There's a number of different items it can run. It can run Terra Flying, Terra Dark, Terra Water, Terra Fairy. There's a number of good Terra options for it. Amazing move pool, a signature move. Just, it has everything basically. Its only real weakness is that it's a little slow, but it gets priority, which compensates a lot for that. So also dark typing is nice defensively. Having, resisting both of Hydreigon stabs is really good. Resisting Murkrow Foul Play, resisting both of Meowscarada stabs is really good. Resisting both of the Goldango stabs is really good. Resisting, Maushold and Murkrow stabs is good. So it's a really good Pokemon. It's a really, really good Pokemon. I think it's not the most intuitive to use because like it's slow, and slow Pokemon in general are kind of hard to get the hang of, but it's so good, especially with Assault Vest. It becomes so tanky. Yeah, no, I'm really impressed by this Pokemon. I think it will definitely, I think it's one of the best new Pokemon. In my opinion, the contenders for best new Pokemon are Dondozo, Annihilate, Goldango, and Kingambit. Those are like the ones that I think are the absolute best of this generation, and we'll definitely see Kingambit winning tournaments. It's very, very strong. And that's how I rank every single Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet. Let me know what you agree with, what you disagree with, if there's anything you think I overestimated, underestimated. Yeah, but regardless, thank you for watching. I really appreciate it.